Satkartar dosto, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Very good morning today for a change. It's 11:06 and here I am, up and running. And my greetings to you. It's going to be in America. It's going to be the Independence Day weekend. So my compliments to everyone. We are virtually soaring to Palo Alto, California today. My conversation will be with CEO and co-founder of Thread Robotics, Gurjeet Singh. He is a person who is from Delhi, but he's been in the United States for a number of years now. Thread Robotics is creating a new generation of machine learning based robots to increase the success rate of the in-vitro fertilization. He was previously the co-founder and CEO at Ayasdi. Well, I have to check with him how does he pronounce it. In this role, he led a technology movement that pioneered the use of artificial intelligence. I'm going to be talking about that with him some, to solve complex enterprise-class challenges. As the founding CEO of Ayasdi, he drove the development, and productization of key mathematical and machine learning algorithms for topological data analysis, otherwise abbreviated as TDA. It's not the travel and driving allowance. His work on TDA originated during his time as a graduate student in Stanford's mathematics department. Dr. Singh is the author of numerous patents and has published in a variety of top mathematics and computer science journals. Gurjeet also served on the technology advisory board at HSBC and was named to the Silicon Valley Business Journal's 40 under 40 list in 2015. He holds a B.Tech from Delhi University and a PhD in Computational Mathematics from Stanford University. He lives in Palo Alto with his Malkin would be his wife, and 2 children, and develops multi-legged robots in his spare time. I wonder when he has spare time. So anyway, the introduction in Punjabi now. Dosto, mere jani dushmano, te mere naal raj ke nafrat karan waleo, ji aaya nu. Aj dekho mere naal baithe ne Dr. Gurjeet Singh, ਮੁਖੀਏ ਵੀ ਹਨਗੇ ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ co-found ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ Thread Robotics ਤੇ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਕਹੀਏ ਜੇ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਦਾ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਤਰਜਮਾ ਕਰਾਂ ਹੁਣ Thread Robotics ਦਾ ਕੀ ਕਰਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਹਾਂਜੀ ਧਾਗਾ ਪੁਤਲਾ
thread of life
ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਬਕਾਇਦਾ ਕਰੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਤਰੋੜਨਾ ਮਰੋੜਨਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਜਾਣ ਕੇ ਹੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਆਦਤ ਭੈੜੀ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਰੋਣਾ ਵੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਹੱਸਣਾ ਕੱਢਣਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਦੋਸਤੋ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਮੈਂ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਜਾਨੀ ਦੁਸ਼ਮਣੋ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਦਾਬ ਹੈ ਨਮਸਕਾਰ ਹੈ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਆਸ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀਕਐਂਡ ਹੈਗਾ ਹੈ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਦਿਵਸ ਮਨਾਇਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਡਾਰੀ ਮਾਰ ਕੇ ਪਾਲੋ ਆਲਟੋ ਕੈਲੀਫੋਰਨੀਆ ਪੁੱਜ ਚੁੱਕੇ ਹਾਂ ਗੁਰਜੀਤ ਹੋਣੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਪਰਸਨਲ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਹੈਗਾ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਜੁੜ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਾਰਜ ਹੈਗਾ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਇਨ ਵਿਟਰੋ ਫਰਟੀਲਾਈਜੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਆਰਟੀਫਿਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਜੂਨ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਜਨਾਉਣਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕੁੱਖ ਸੂਨੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਬੈਰਨ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਫਰਟੀਲਿਟੀ ਜਿਹਨੂੰ ਕਹੀਏ ਨਵਜਨਮ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸੂਨੀ ਕੁੱਖ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਆਬਾਦ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇਹ ਆਈਐਸਡੀ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੰਪਨੀ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਵੀ co-found ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਫੀ ਅਰਸਾ ਗੁਜ਼ਾਰਿਆ ਅੱਜ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਰਟੀਫਿਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਇੰਟੈਲੀਜੈਂਸ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇੱਕ ਕੰਪਿਊਟਰ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਸੂਝ ਬੂਝ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਨਸਾਨੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਖੱਟ ਹੈ ਵਿੱਦਿਆ ਦੀ ਸਮਝ ਦੀ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਾ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਇੱਕ ਕੰਪਿਊਟਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਇੱਕ ਪੁਰਜੇ ਦੇ ਵਜੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਸੰਦ ਦੇ ਵਜੋਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇਸਤੇਮਾਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਵੱਖਰੇ ਕੰਮਾਂ ਕਾਰਜਾਂ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਬਤ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕਾਫੀ ਕੰਮ ਰਿਹਾ ਮੈਥਮੈਟਿਕਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਰਿਹਾ ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮਸ਼ੀਨ ਲਰਨਿੰਗ ਐਲਗੋਰਿਦਮ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਟੋਪੋਲੋਜੀਕਲ ਡੇਟਾ ਐਨਾਲਿਸਿਸ ਉਹਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੰਮ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ। ਉਸ ਦੀ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਮੈਂਟ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਸੈਕਿੰਡ ਹੋਲਡ ਕਰਨਾ। ਕੋਈ ਜਨਾਬ ਦਰਵਾਜ਼ੇ ਤੇ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। क्या हाँ ठीक है, कर दीजिए, पहले एक बार बजा के इंतजार करना होता है। So, the pandemic era, this gentleman was so, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸਬਜ਼ੀਆਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਇਆ ਹੈ ਜਨਾਬ, ਉਹ ਆਰਗੈਨਿਕ ਖਾਣਾ ਤੇ ਉਹਨੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਨਾ ਚੰਗੀਆਂ ਘੰਟੀਆਂ ਵਜਾਤੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਹੁਣ ਮੇਰਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਐਕਸ ਡਾਈਨਿੰਗ ਰੂਮ ਹੈਗਾ, ਉਹ ਡਾਈਨਿੰਗ ਟੇਬਲ ਹੈਗਾ, ਹੁਣ ਮੈਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਬੈਠਾ, ਹੁਣ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਬੈਲਾਂ ਹੀ ਵਜਾਣੀਆਂ ਪੈਣਗੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਜਾਂ ਪੈ ਜਾਣਾ ਸੀ। ਵੈਲ ਆਈ ਡੋਂਟ ਯੂਜੂਅਲੀ ਅਪੋਲੋਜਾਈਜ਼, ਆਈ ਸ਼ੁਡਨਟ ਅਪੋਲੋਜਾਈਜ਼, ਬਟ ਦਿਸ ਇਜ਼ ਹਾਊ ਇਟ ਇਜ਼, ਦ ਕੋਵਿਡ ਜ਼ਮਾਨਾ। ਸੋ ਮੈਂ ਦੋਸਤੋ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੱਸ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪੁਰਾਣਾ ਕਾਰਜ ਰਿਹਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵੀ ਬੜਾ ਇੱਕ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਲੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ। ਉਹ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲੋਂ, ਗੁਰਜੀਤ ਹੋਣਾ ਕੋਲੋਂ ਸਮਝਾਂਗੇ। ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ ਐਡਵਾਈਜ਼ਰੀ ਬੋਰਡ HSBC ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ। ਫਿਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਿਲੀਕਨ ਵੈਲੀ ਹੈਗਾ, ਉਹਦਾ ਬਿਜ਼ਨਸ ਜਰਨਲ ਹੈਗਾ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ 40 ਜਿਹੜੇ ਟੌਪ ਦੇ ਗਿਣਦੇ ਨੇ, 40 ਦੀ ਉਮਰ ਤੱਕ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵਿਦਵਾਨ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਗਨਿਸਟ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਫੀਲਡ ਦੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸ਼ਿਰਕਤ 2015 ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ। B.Tech ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦਿੱਲੀ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਤੋਂ ਕੀਤੀ, PhD ਕੰਪਿਊਟੇਸ਼ਨਲ ਮੈਥਮੈਟਿਕਸ ਤੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੀਤੀ ਸਟੈਨਫੋਰਡ ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਤੋਂ। ਜਿਵੇਂ ਦੱਸਿਆ, ਪਾਲੋ ਆਲਟੋ ਆਪਣੀ ਮਾਲਕਿਨ ਤੇ 2 ਖੂਬਸੂਰਤ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨਾਲ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ। ਤੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਵਿਹਲਾ ਸਮਾਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੈਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਛੇੜਦਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਵਿਹਲੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਵੀ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਕਦੋਂ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਉਹ ਲੱਤਾਂ ਵਾਲੇ ਰੋਬੋਟ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਨਾ ਬਣਾਉਣ 'ਚ ਸ਼ੌਂਕ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਨੇ। Gurjeet, I'm so glad. Welcome to the YaarAnād Virtual Baiṭhak series. This is the 206th Mēlā, second season's 45th episode. And the second season marks the 400th birth anniversary of Guru Tegh Bahadur, the 9th Guru of the Sikhs, and the unparalleled martyr in history. For he sacrificed his life to protect a faith he did not even practice, the Hindu Dharma. Giving his life to safeguard the Hindu Tilak and Janeu, the 9th heir of Guru Nanak embodied a fearless commitment to the freedom to choose and practice one's own faith. He was a prolific 𝐒𝐞𝐬𝐲 exponent, my predecessor. On an intimate note, he was a poet and a singer whose musical contributions include Raag Jajavanti. So, ji aaya nu, Gurjeet, welcome to the YaarAnād Virtual Baiṭhak series.
I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be here. It's such a joy.
You're all kind. Where do I begin? I mean, I am so tempted to talk about artificial intelligence at the very onset. The irony that I see, on one hand, you're talking of artificial intelligence, you're talking of robots, and then, legged robots as well. That is, going to be taking over. That is, or that has been a field that has been taking over work from actual beings, actual workers, actual human workforce. On the other hand, you're also now looking at the IVF, In-Vitro Fertilization. मतलब बंदियां दे काम खोलो ते न्याणे जम्मो भी. This is like, amazing for me to see this irony. That when I look at you, when I think of you, I'm sort of so taken by this idea. Why not? Let's begin with this. I mean, how do you?
Yeah, sure.
You placed me on a catch-22 at the very onset. A मामला है कि एक ही मसला है।
Yeah. So, I grew up reading science fiction, and science fiction as literary work is very near and dear to me. So, when you read about science fiction, there are sort of 2 things that become very apparent to you, right? There are 2 obvious cheezein hain that you find out on the outset. The first thing is that the best of our imagination, the best authors that we could find to think about the future, They have imagined two types of futures. There are, dystopic futures, right, in which everybody dies and something horrible happens, right? Um, Maybe an alien race invades the planet, or like, some calamity happens, and people fight for scraps and bad stuff happens. So there is like, that's one side of science fiction. The other side of science fiction is a utopic science side of science fiction, right, in which we foresee a future of abundance, of infinite wealth, of infinite resources, and a future in which every individual is not measured by the work that they provide, to earn money,
Hmm.
but where every individual is measured by what they want to be measured by what they want to achieve in life, by what their interests are. So I am a ardent believer in that infinite utopic future. Just may the new today what happens is, I think I'll be very blunt and say that most people who are born today are basically born slaves to a system in which you have to earn money, you have to figure out how to live and where to live and how to make a living. And societally, we had to do this, so we've placed this notion of working for a livelihood on a pedestal, and we've said that this is the right way of living.
Hmm.
But I feel like the development of artificial intelligence and these technologies actually is a fundamental step that is required for us to move towards that utopic future, in which we are no longer going to sort of have to do stuff that we may not enjoy, that we may not want to gain mastery in. आप विद्या की बात कर रहे थे, right? So like, when will we most people are not don't have the luxury to gain vidya today. And so I fervently believe that AI and machine learning, they are not against people. These are fundamental improvements that we must.
I mean, that was an artificial laugh. I mean, against people. Ha 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 ha. I was trying to be a
Yeah.
little filmy. We'll have a guerrilla warfare on that. Anyway, please
Yeah.
continue for now. Yeah.
No, but again, that's my argument. I feel like artificial intelligence is important for a utopic future,
Yeah,
and I
but
want to
you're
help
already
with a utopic future.
supposing there are things that we don't like. For example, a tractor, right? A tractor
Yeah.
is a very mechanical, but yes, also electrical, artificial intelligence. That's a machine intervention. How, as a
Yeah.
layperson, I twist it. What did it take away from me? It disconnected me from the animal, right? The bull, the buffalo, etc.
Yeah.
And the experience for there are two perspectives, as I philosophically, from a philosophic note,
Yeah.
that I see that have been at war. One is a technical perspective, which is very, and both
Yeah.
are inseparable, and it's the same person who has both. Even you are
Yeah.
a human being who is
Yeah.
talking of artificial
Yeah.
intelligence, and we are using artificial intelligence to communicate today. A lot of it. I mean,
Yeah.
literally everything
That's
is,
right.
yeah, we are seeping through it. So I'm not sort of any sworn this or sworn that. I'm not on either side. I'm in the center of the center. But for the sake of a very important argument, one is a technical perspective.
Hmm.
I have plenty of it too, and you are, of course, a maestro within that field. The other is a cultural perspective, which I have.
Hmm.
In fact, I've
Yeah.
given this within the field, within the academic field. Taj Mahal, as I have given examples, is
Yeah.
not the produce of a technical perspective. It is the construct. It is a construct
Yeah.
of a technical perspective, but is the ideation of a cultural perspective. The idea.
Yeah. Of course.
You have
Yeah.
patents, right? That is a without a cultural perspective, you cannot come up with an idea. So the man
Yeah.
just say, "Hey, guys," so then you achieve something falls within that. Um,
Yeah.
the process, if it is a ready-made painting, but if I am actually
Yeah.
learning how to paint, that process of producing is something that makes me richer.
Absolutely.
So if I am detached from actual organic farming or farming, where I'm just going to I mean, in COVID, we don't even go. We just now the guy came to
Totally.
drop organic
Right.
food.
You phone.
This guy is
Right.
banging the bell, 50 times, and I was about to
Yeah.
shout, okay, kaun aaya bhai? You
Yeah.
know, the we don't even the idea of traveling to a store to meet with people that is gone, right? ਉਹ ਜਿਵੇਂ
Yeah.
ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਛਿੱਤਰ ਵੀ ਲੈਣੇ ਹੋ ਨਾ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲਾਈਜ਼ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹ ਸਟੋਰ ਤੇ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਹੋ
Yeah.
ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਨਾ ਆਓ ਬਾਹਰ ਚਲੀਏ ਉਹ
Yeah.
ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜੀ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਤੁਰੋ ਬੰਦਾ ਕਹੇ ਯਾਰ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ
Yeah.
ਭੱਜ ਗਿਆ ਫੇਰ ਕੀ ਹੈ they not worried make you walk away
Yeah.
from the store then they say can you turn
Yeah.
back they say are you going to
Yeah.
run ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੌੜੋਗੇ ਕਿ ਹਾਂ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਦੌੜਦੇ ਹੋ ਤੇਜ਼ ਜਾਂ ਹੌਲੀ ਇਹ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੌਲੀ ਦੌੜਦੇ ਹੋ ਅੱਛਾ ਦੌੜ ਕੇ ਦਿਖਾਓ ਮੈਂ ਫੇਰ ਉਹਨਾਂ
Yeah.
ਨੂੰ ਕਹਾਂਗਾ ਹੱਸ ਕੇ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਜੇ ਸੱਚੀ ਮੁੱਚੀ ਦੌੜ ਗਿਆ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕੋਈ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਫਿਕਰ ਨਾ ਕਰੋ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮੈਂ ਆਈਲ ਪੇ ਫॉर ਯੂਰ ਸ਼ੂਜ਼ ਹਾਸੇ
Yeah.
ਖੇਡਦੇ ਹੋਏ ਉਹ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ
Of course.
ਤੋੜ ਦੇਖਦੇ ਆਂਦੇ ਆ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਤੁਰ ਕੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਪੈਰ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਗਿਰਦਾ ਪਿਆ ਉਹ ਇੱਕ
Yeah.
ਇੰਟੈਂਜੀਬਲ ਐਸੈਟ ਹੈਗਾ ਅਕਲ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਹਾਂ ਠੀਕ ਹੈ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਮਸ਼ੀਨ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਪਾ ਦਿਓਗੇ ਪਰ ਇੱਕ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬੰਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਬੰਦਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਜੁੜਦਾ ਹੈ ਇੱਕ ਮਰਮ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਦਿਲ ਨੂੰ ਠੰਡ ਜਿਹੜੀ
Yeah.
ਪੈਂਦੀ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਿਵੇਂ
Yeah.
ਡੀਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੋ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਯੂਟੋਪੀਆ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਕੋਲੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਬੰਨੇ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਹਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਕਾਰਜ 'ਚ ਖੋ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਤੇ ਦੂਜੇ ਬੰਨੇ
Yeah.
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਸਾਧਨ ਵੀ ਦੇ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ ਬਣਾ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਮੇਰੀ ਸਮਝ ਤੋਂ ਪਰੇ
So
ਹੈ
let me explain. तो देखो जैसे ना I live here in Los Altos Hills. यहाँ पे uh, luckily we have enough land, and my wife Riti, she grew up in Odisha in a farming family, right? So all of her my ancestors were not quite as much on the farming side. They used to be when in Pakistan before they moved to the US, moved to India.
I mean they were
But in India, they were,
yeah
huh?
they were in India and then they moved to India.
Yeah, that's right. So, but her family, even her father, he was a farmer, and so they are like, she's really into farming. So I have no dearth of resources at this point in my life, luckily. But she is so into farming that there are 5 vegetable patches in my house. Jahan pe ki, she goes with her hands, tills the ground, puts in, tomato ugati hai, and aloo ugati hai, and mirchi ugati hai, and strawberries and all of that stuff, right? Which she doesn't have to. So, but she loves it, and so she, even though she has the means, she has dedicated herself to mastering the art of growing these, and then producing these, and then sharing the joy of having produced these with our friends and
Took this
and our
photo of
family.
yours, by the way. She took this photo of yours.
Yes, she did. She did. So,
I mean,
so
guy
my
is. I'm deliberately interrupting him. He's talking of her. I had to beg of him for the last weeks to give me a photo. I mean, you will be misled that this guy is so happy as is employed as a husband. The Malkin is so frightening. The rest of the shoot, the rest of the series, he's or the Rangundya hoya. Matlab he's like frozen in front of her, like, yes, ma'am saab. Hanji Malkin, jo kahogi main theek hu. Matlab his guy is like literally fused, in front of anyway, continue. I had to. I had to. Matlab kinne kalje ch thand pai. I had to
yeah.
Photoshop you because you made me work hard. How many hours did you make me take photo?
I'm sorry.
And then you
I'm,
sent me of all the photos taken by your wife. Come on.
but that's
मतलब
what I have.
गुलामी की
I'm
इतनी
not a conservator.
गुलामी इतनी ज्यादा जनाब जोरू के गुलाम मत बनो हम मर्द जात की भी थोड़ा थोड़ा परवाह करो
No, but I not being a conservator. I am very bad at documenting
I have
my
serious
life.
doubts. I'm thinking of these Sardars who are exported, who run away from India and they get into
Uh-huh.
Stanford. Even Mayank,
Uh-huh.
who brought us
Uh-huh.
together. Mayank
Yes.
also, I have gone and taken shots, but oh, mast hai Malang. He doesn't care about the
That's
photo.
right.
Nahi hai hai.
Yeah.
मतलब
Same here.
what's wrong
I
with the
literally don't
Stanford?
have any pictures. It's yeah. I don't have any. There was just no need to kind of have pictures of myself.
मतलब that's a
Sorry
mugshot in
about
a
that.
prison, right? When you go to the prison, like the American prison, ਪਿੱਛੇ ਉਹ ਬਸ ਉਹ ਧਾਰੀਆਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, ਤੇਰੀ ਮਾਲਕਿਨ ਦੀ
Yeah,
ਪੇਂਟਿੰਗ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ। ਉਹ but you know
yeah.
the size ਇਦਾਂ ਖੜਾ ਹੋਇਆ, ਫਿਰ ਇਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਖੜਾ ਹੋਏਗਾ, ਫਿਰ ਇਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਖੜਾ ਹੋਏਗਾ, you know. That photo reminded me of that ਕਿ ਬੰਦਾ ਨਾ ਵਾਕਈ जोरू का गुलाम ਇੰਨਾ है, मतलब he doesn't live at home, ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ
नहीं,
कैद ਵਿੱਚ
you are, नहीं, वैसे you are totally right. I am totally जोरू का गुलाम. No, no shame in admitting it. One should know what one is, and that is me.
yes, you were telling, now you may continue.
So, so what I was saying is, in some sense, right? I think the idea of abundance and utopia, right, is basically that you have the choice, right? And when you decide to get into something, that you can get into any depth of the thing. And just आप कह रहे थे, like the connection between people. I think in some sense you are absolutely right. Machines, we have not thus far we have not been able to teach them empathy, right? They don't empathize with us. They're just operating on a set of instructions. Um, and so I think that is still today, and it will change. But today it is still a domain of the human connection or of people. But I think we kind of have to, as we move forward, we'll have to start separating our need for empathetic connection, right, where we want to be together and share feelings and share spaces and share knowledge and share joy, versus the mundane aspects of our life, which we can largely be mechanized. But if somebody did want to go into the mundane parts of their life, they could go as deep as they want into it. So I think that is the idea of utopia. It's not that that you couldn't farm anymore. Of course you can farm anymore. You can do whatever you want. And so if you wanted to get into farming and you wanted to till the land by yourself, of course you can do it. It's an abundant society. There are enough resources and nobody there to stop you.
But the thing is that that is tokenism in a way. It is like simulating an artificial reality. So life as necessary. Let me use the term necessary. Some of the
Mhm.
values that are necessary to be a human being, like
Mhm.
empathy is one that
Yeah.
one virtue that you measured. Forgiveness. Guru Nanak
Yeah.
Sahib says, "आँख में सिंगार कामन तन पहराए." Khima Singar, of forgiveness, the ornament of of forgiveness that the bride, and Guru Nanak is talking about himself, he, the bride,
Uh-huh.
he says, Ravat Lal Pyari, the Parampurk Parveswara only accepts and is pleased if he says, if I am ornate with forgiveness and many, many virtues. So, there are ways, it's an association, it's undergoing a
Yeah.
process. When as tokenism, when only when organic farming is not what is normally done, where everybody, like, I'm growing my own vegetable, that is not possible now. I live in a in a
Yeah.
half of the bungalow, which we have here, and there are no fields, etc. That is where perhaps where I'm pointing towards, that life which should have been natural and something ordinary for us has
Yeah.
itself become exclusive, and therefore the values that I gain, even being a human being, would become exclusive. Machines,
Yeah.
today in America,
No,
you have
I
AR-15
think
bias building. AR-15 is an artificial intelligence. It's not human
yeah.
might, which is killing. It's a bullet, etc. So many AIs coming into. If I may, as a layperson, utilize that, extend that, even if it is a lesser model of AI, but there is a pre-programmed system, trigger ਵੀ ਹੈਗਾ, ਉਹ ਕਰੋਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਮਕੈਨੀਕਲ ਹੈਗਾ, ਪਰ ਉਹ ਅਕਲ ਹੈਗੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਟ੍ਰਿਗਰ ਪਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਲੋੜ ਨਹੀਂ. As an ex-aviator, tomorrow in maybe 20 years, you will have robots which are programmed going into a nightclub and killing. Where are we headed as that? We are colonizing. Initially, we colonize others, and we are just
Yeah.
creating sophisticated colonies for ourselves, where
Yeah.
we are getting more and more detached from life. That is my fear. but fear in the
Yeah.
sense, not in terms of as an adversary, as just I'm one of the factors that's going to make sure that we do not
Yeah.
that we have bridges, that
That's
we
right.
burn the bridges between like the
Yeah.
drones, that go and kill. We have seen so many films where the trauma that even those who fly drones are also captured when they
That's right.
when an innocent is killed, or they hold back, they sometimes defy orders because they just cannot, their fingers are trembling and they have trauma,
That's
even if they have not actually flown to that, they just, for them it's just a video
right.
game.
Right.
So it'll, I thought it'll be best to discuss all of this with you, as you're not just a lay person like I am, but you're someone who's versed in it, who's actually across the bridge as well.
Yeah. So I think I want to say two things, right? So one important point that you said, right? For example, about the connection with the earth, right? You mentioned you live in a in a bungalow in New Delhi, and perhaps there isn't the opportunity to kind of feel connected to a simpler way of living, or to the simplicity of life.
I have a few
But I will
bonsai.
say, sorry.
I have a few bonsai plants. Yeah,
Right. But I will say that for a lot of the people, including you and I, who have the privilege to have this discussion, that is a choice that we made, right? It is a choice, that we choose to live in a setting where we chose to value sort of different aspects of our life, or our lives, more than sort of valuing the deeper connection with, or a simpler living, which we could have done, right? If I want to leave here and go live in a village somewhere, I have the means to do it. I can achieve it tomorrow without having to think twice about it. But I feel like the mission for my life that I have chosen for myself is best served where I am, same as you, right? The mission for your life is best served in the position where you are. So that's a choice that we made, right? And we have the resources to have made a simpler choice. The second thing that I will point out, which is that you are about a potentially dystopic future. That is absolutely correct, and I think now is the time for us as a society to come together and debate how are we going to raise our child. This machine learning or AI today is in its infancy. It can do very basic things, but the things that it can do with horrific efficiency. So we as a society, we get to govern it, we get to set the rules, we get to debate, and we get to discuss the guardrails that we want to place around it, what we want to teach it, and how we want it to grow. So you should be terrified of those that kind of a future, because now is the exact time when we have to arrive at our values and impart those values to these systems. And some of those are will be delivered by human operators, and some of those will be delivered as a set of guiding principles, or a set of algorithms, or a set of rules that we will program into these systems, right? So I think this is the right feeling that you have, and these are the right questions to ask.
even for example, I mean, when hypocrisy is the one that rails, I mean, simple formula. um, American politicians love to call their president the leader of the free world. Look at the terms, free world. I mean, what is it free from? It is not free from hypocrisy. It is not free from hallucination, or sort of a religious hypothesis. Like I have a evangelical leader on a debate on MSNBC, some or CNN, who's brought in for, it was a debate about Biden versus Trump, the new and the old vaccines, etc. But that guy is so drawn and with such faith says that Christianity is, that God and heaven is through this. That's the belief. And I've been to so many dramas like the Parliament of World Religion, Interfaith, this and that. Every, Santa Singh, Mustaq Ali, John Abrams, all of these guys would come with some scripture or another under their armpit and sit in a roundtable session thinking that you all scoundrels are going to hell, only I'm going to heaven. You know,
Right.
that's the kind of attitude with what people somehow have. When you have such powerful countries being run by people who are not evolved, who are
Yeah.
petty, who are conceited, who are
Yeah.
infected with the worst ideas of tribalism, one-upmanship, subaltern tendencies, and so on and so forth. When those people or such people have power more than they deserve and therefore more than what they can handle, where are we headed? These are important questions. I'm an
Yeah.
aviator, ex-aviator. As at age 18, I said I want to have my own satellite. I want to build spaceships. In 1988, I had not
Yeah.
known that there'll be Elon Musk's and Richard Branson's and this guy, what's his name, the guy from Google, Jeff Bezos. These guys are
Yeah.
now going to space. I'm talking about 88 when I said I want to have my own. As someone who was wanting to be a fighter pilot, and I got selected to fly for the Air Force. Then I renounced my career before I joined to come into conservation, etc., etc. But in later 80s, I've already said I want to have my own satellite. I want to have my own, ability
Yeah.
to. That I was headed. I used to design planes. I would have, if I had gone on, there are many patents that were in the running. Even in my instrument making, I have not applied for them, but they're all, even the drawings and everything has been done
Yeah.
many times over. But it's just that I'm busy with my other work. The point
Yeah.
I'm making is that the kind of colonization of space and planets and where we are headed, it's not nice because these are people who have nothing exclusive within. They are exclusive without. That I'm just saying my fears are not unfounded.
Yeah. So look, I as an analytical person, I fall back on data. So there are I think if I remember correctly, Steven Pinker, right, he wrote a book about the state of the world and sort of how it's evolved. And on every metric that any humanitarian based person would want to look at, the world is dramatically better today than it was 20, 30, 50, 60, 70 years ago. Life expectancy, the percentage of poverty,
But
there
water
is
and forests, we are worse than we were. So depending on
we
what
are
data are you talking about, that's an exclusive use of
totally,
data.
it, it is
Where
it
I
is
mean, look at Anandpur Saab, and please continue. Just to give you an example where I get really, where I'm allergic, just because these bums have gotten hands on a bulldozer, they are
Mhm.
planing the little hills on which Guru Gobind danced and played and learned how to fight and taught how to fight. There's an idea, there's something called nature and we need to live with it. But when we
Yeah.
try in the kind of trash that we are generating, why? Because we are able to source so much more. So it depends on
Yeah.
what data you're sourcing and what you're ignoring. I don't know where the sum game in the end is, please continue.
No, no. So you're absolutely right. There are certainly things that are concerning, but these are things that are different than the things that used to concern us, right? So if you take human health as an example, right? It used to be the case that most people used to pass away or die from infectious diseases. Then it turned out that most people, like, we controlled infectious diseases very effectively. Now most people started passing away from heart diseases. We are at the stage where we can control heart disease very well. Now most people are passing away from cancers. So we have made progress there. Our economy has made progress. You're right, we have to come to terms with the damage that we are doing to our environment. That is the calling of this generation. We have screwed up in the past, and we did not pay attention. But if you look at the younger world leaders, people like Greta Thunberg, and people like some of the younger politicians in the US. We will make this better. Yes, it's in a bad state, and it has gotten in a bad state. But I think there is a growing recognition amongst the next generation that it needs to be fixed, and we will fix it.
Yeah,
Life
Marjorie,
will find a way.
very, very conscious. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, we will fix it. There is.
Marjorie Green, I mean, she's very conscious, very literate about these matters.
Yeah. Well, well, there are others though who are better.
Young leaders. It's again a very
Yeah.
frightening prospect, but continue.
Yeah, but I think we will fix it. I will tell you. So look, since I operate in this entrepreneurial startup optimistic world, I will tell you about a colleague of ours. When I say colleague, I've met him a couple times, but I think he's doing something excellent. So he was a very successful startup founder. He realized that climate change is a huge issue, and he said, now that I've made my money, I want to make a mark on climate change. So he basically, his name is Yishan Wong. He essentially came up with a desalinization plant, and he ran an analysis that said that if we are able to greenify 5% of equatorial deserts, we can essentially completely reverse climate change on a carbon capture basis. So he essentially bought a half an island in Hawaii. He had the resources to do it. He set up a solar plant in which he basically uses solar energy to desalinate water, and then he's essentially irrigated half a hill there, and has produced so much carbon offsets there that he's, from a business perspective, also able to effectively sell them. Right, so that's an optimistic take on. I don't look at politicians as our leaders. I think they are people who work for us, and many times they get things wrong. They are their own people, and they have their serving interests above
Ah,
everything else.
you see them as pawns. Yeah, I understand. You don't see them as
Right.
leaders.
Right. I don't see them as leaders. I think they are people who work for the public. That's how I see them.
I mean,
And but sorry.
work for the corporate sector. Yeah,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Ideally, they work for the people,
your species is robots in the sense.
but yeah, but I see my fellow entrepreneurs, and I think that we are going to change things. If I look at some of the biggest tech companies like Microsoft, for example, right, they are basically saying that we want to be carbon not carbon neutral, we want to be carbon negative by 2023, which is just 2 years from now. Google is already carbon neutral on their huge infrastructure spending and so on. So I don't believe politicians can do whatever. They'll never get out of their own way. So I don't believe in them. I don't trust in them. But I do believe in capitalism and entrepreneurship to help us solve these problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it needs conscious leaders, business leaders who
Uh,
have the money and the means, no doubt about that. But I see, given the talking of data, the kind of greed infatuation, the way they are, the kind of egos they are
yeah,
carrying, the kind of sort of illusion, it is not yet promising. The percentage of good people, percentage of idiots in any country, in every field is the same, and they are a majority. They're like the common sense is
that's
the
right.
one that
The
horrifies
vast
people.
majority.
Yes.
Yeah, of
So,
course.
um, work on now your work. You speak of machine learning. Can you
Mhm.
tell us about what are your thoughts and ideas around machine learning? What is it?
Yeah. So, let me, we can start from the basic idea there, right? Imagine you have a calculator, right? That everybody learns to use. And, to actually compute something with a calculator, the operator of the calculator, right? The person who's using the calculator has to figure out what they want to calculate. And then the calculator itself is a very simple device, right? It has a set of algorithms in it. You want to add two large numbers, it knows how to add two large numbers. You want to multiply some stuff, it knows how to multiply them. It does these simple things. But the way that a calculator was built is that some smart people sat together in a room, or many rooms, many years, and they came up with algorithms. They said, okay, if we want to add two large numbers and we want to use a calculator to do it, we have to write down the exact steps. Add the numbers, borrow, carry the one, add the numbers, carry the one, blah blah blah, whatever. Right? We came up with these exact algorithms, and that has worked exceedingly well. That's worked wonderfully well. We've been able to scale it. It's amazing. But then we came across a class of problems where we simply, try as we might, could not come up with solutions to solve those problems. So as an example, if I show a picture of two different birds to a computer, let's say 10 years ago, and asked, the mightiest supercomputer that we know, Google, to say, okay, can you tell me what is the species of this bird? It would not be able to at all. Like, you couldn't even pose the question. It would fail on the outset. So what we realize that there's a different class of computer algorithms now to whom we can show this data. We can show millions of examples of different types of birds which have been labeled by people, and the algorithm itself is very simple. The learning algorithm is itself very simple. The complexity now is in the data, that you have to find large data sets, like millions of pictures of birds. You have to get people to label those data sets and say, okay, this bird is a sparrow, that bird is a crow, this is a vulture, whatever. And then the learning algorithm will figure out that when shown a picture of a new bird, is this a crow or an eagle or whatever. So that's the basic crux of machine learning, is that instead of programming computers to do some specific tasks, we program with a general ability to learn from data. And then our tasks as the creators of these systems shifts to giving them the appropriate data to learn from. So that's a fundamental sort of paradigm shift in the way we think of computers and programming. So
Mhm.
that's what machine learning is.
Right.
Does that
And
make sense?
yeah, 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 of course. It's very, very important to have that. I mean, as from a layperson's perspective, these are very, very important interventions that sort of increase our understanding. Um, the from machine learning allowing or formulating methods that the machine can learn, and then of course the artificial intelligence is again is directly proportional. The more the machine learns, the better the AI is. um, can you tell us, ordinary folks, what exactly is artificial intelligence? I mean, I did allude to tools,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera, those very
Yeah.
simple forms. But how do you see? How would you?
Yeah.
What is this idea of artificial intelligence to you?
So artificial intelligence is kind
I
of
mean,
an ill-defined
I mean,
thing.
even intelligence, intelligence, even with a human being, is artificial.
You're right, but I will say that artificial intelligence is sort of a very fuzzy concept. It is not well defined, and honestly, that's because we don't even know how to define intelligence, right? There is no subjective, there is no objective test of intelligence. So artificial intelligence is an idea. It's not a thing. It's an idea. And the general idea is that we want computers that mimic what people can do. That's the best we can say about artificial intelligence. Is that at its height, when we are done developing it, that it should be able to mimic a person, right? And we are very far away from that. Like, we are exceedingly far away from it. I cannot explain in human terms how far away from that idea we are. Right. So thus far, the things that we have, they are very powerful, they are predictable, they are smart, they are fast, but they are toys. They are small little things that work in some special cases. But it turns out that the cases where they do work are repetitive things that people would hate doing.
Like,
So actually, let me give you some examples. I'll give you some mundane examples, and I'll give you some specific examples. So some mundane examples are that, if you go to any warehouse today where they are packing up, boxes for shipping, like Amazon ships you boxes full, stuff in a box. There is a big problem there, which is that, somebody has to put stuff in a box, wrap it up, put it on the assembly line, send it on, and so on. So it's a very mundane thing. It's a very boring thing, and but we don't really have computers who can do that today very well. So people do it today, and we are very slowly, incredibly slowly, we are now building systems that are called packing systems that can do this simple task, the mundane task of, if this box should contain a bar of soap, a shampoo bottle, and a phone, then find those things in the warehouse, pick them, put them in the box. So that is an example of a mundane thing that even today is 95% done by people, and is something that over the next decade will probably be 95% done by robots and machines. So that's a good example of artificial intelligence. Let me give you some slightly more complicated examples.
a lot
In
of
fact, one of, sorry,
a lot of unemployed people in the next 10 years, as you said.
well, differently employed, not unemployed. They will do other stuff. And I will say that, in general, it doesn't take a lot of qualification or skill to be a packer in a warehouse.
But,
So so like
but
it's
it
not
gives a
like
salary.
it's not like they studied for years and like had developed special skills to do it.
It gives a
Right? Their
salary
knowledge
on robots, and robots will never form unions.
is well, I don't know if that's the case. I think that's not the case. I will actually I'll give you an example. So we are as scientists in the world, we are trying to create new sources of energy. So like fusion, nuclear fusion is a way in which we would like to create energy. And there is a type of a design of a fusion reactor called a stellarator. It was sort of hypothesized by physicists many years ago, but for decades we couldn't actually construct it, right? And we couldn't construct it because the computers weren't powerful enough. And in the last, call it a decade, computers have become powerful enough that computers were able to figure out the placement of the magnets in that system so that we can now actually build a accelerator. So I would argue that it obviously could not have been possible without human agency and human design. But equally, it was not possible without a computational system working hand in hand with a human guide. So when we talk about robot rights and so on, obviously none of these systems are aware today. But at some point, in some undefined future, they are going to become aware, and we should have a legal framework of figuring out which of these systems have rights and what
It,
are they.
I was about to touch upon ethics. We've seen
Yeah,
recent, use and abuse of technology and access. Uh,
yeah,
the way small lapses can lead to catastrophic
that's
damages.
it.
And
Yeah,
as I said, if you look at the idea of Guru Nanak first gives the Shastra, the knowledge, the Ved, not Ved as in the Hindu Ved, Ved as the generic as Gyan, the Zen, the Gyan.
right,
So the Guru says, Gyan ka bandha man rahe, gur bin gyan na hoye. So that idea of the human, as I said, I mean, in a simple way, I look at intelligence as that which one acquires.
right,
Whether that acquisition is from without or from within, but it is something that you
right,
acquire. It is
right,
not something, even if it is sui generis, it comes from within, that is from within, it is still an acquisition. Kripa, sumat, etc. The mati and the sumati, the wisdom, the coming of wisdom. Kabir also sings, "Dekho bhai gyan ki aai आंधी, सबे उड़ानी धर्म की टाटी रहे ना माया बांधी." The kripan, the sword, is given in the hands of a sage, of a saint. But sword in the hands of an idiot is that leads to tragedies. And I see the technology right now is in the hands of people who are very conceited, who are very self-centered, and I wonder the kind of distance we've already covered. Where when will the sadhus then be there? Sadhu like virti, sadhu intent. When and where from they will arrive now at that level.
Yeah.
I think we've gone a little
Yeah.
too far already.
I I disagree. I mean, I think, of course, of course, there are powerful idiots. That no question about it. By definition of sort of the percentage of idiots that you can expect in a room, most powerful people are idiots. Just just because in any given setting, most people are idiots. So yes, you're right. But I think on balance, the smart, powerful people are still sort of overwhelmingly smarter, and like we are still reaping the benefits of them being smarter and wiser and better, right? So for example, some of our biggest companies that exist today, like Google, right, their fundamental motto is do no evil. And it is true that there are instances where they don't act in a way where everybody will agree with them. But I think as an ethos, not even the government of any country says do no evil. So, to the extent that a large percentage of our lives are affected by, technology and technology companies, I feel like we are in better hands than if our lives were run by politicians and governments. So, I have a different opinion. I think we are actually generally in good shape from a technology perspective.
Yeah. Um, and I could have plenty to. I mean, it's a point of. I mean, it's a point to where we can discuss and debate. But I
Yeah,
want what it it somehow leads to where we are headed as within. We've spoken about AI, about ethics, for example, the values that are required, even if they are not there. Um,
yeah,
um, we talk of, and you were sort of, people have enjoyed your interventions and thought process, in fact, with regards to which I've alluded to in a way of 95% today is done by men and women. And then maybe in 10 years, your estimation is that the roles will be reversed. It'll be 95% with
yeah,
the machines and so on and so forth. It's somehow, when I spoke about employment, unemployment, etc.
yeah,
Some people may say that there'll be like the Green Deal and all that, sort of looking for greener fuels. Battery, for example, is not really green. The kind of destruction it does, the kind of mining, etc., which is required to do that. So it is still not something that helps the planet. It is still one kind of consumption and abuse and use versus another,
yeah,
and looking for a lesser of the evils, lesser of the two or three or four
yeah.
evils.
That's right.
Uh, but and then within that field, with for example coal industry and the petroleum, we are saying, oh,
Yeah,
let's move for greener fuels, etc. It'll produce new kinds of jobs, but we're looking at a certain population which will never be able to work. That's
that's
practical, just simply practical. It's a
yeah,
phony way of
that's
saying,
right.
oh, we will have new employment, but new employment for the newer generation. We are telling an old
Yeah,
generation, thank you very much, go home, we'll give you pension, etc., etc. That
yeah,
again, we don't have enough social welfare systems, and we're allergic to
yeah,
that. We've gotten our priorities a little too sort of confused.
yeah,
But so looking at one, that it'll be great to have you share your thoughts about where the business world is headed, and we at large people are being led like herds.
yeah,
Uh, and then to look at the people's right, I mean, the workers is right. And then, as I mentioned about machines will never form unions because in the end they're a software. The
Yeah.
owner is the one who programs. If you say, okay, compute robots, form a union, they'll form a union. But you say, sorry, unions are not there, and I am your friend. You cannot hurt me. They will always see
Yeah.
you. They will never be able to even touch you. So, but then
Yeah.
machines and their rights as well. As a son of a soldier, and someone who grew up, with the idea of machines and
Yeah.
warfare, strategy, tactics, war gaming, the machines, the robots, the way the tanks, for example, are still manned robots, but soon
Yeah.
we already have soldiers, etc., two-legged, four-legged, into the
Yeah.
field, that we will have that. So ethics is going to be human ethics is going to be less and less. You'll devise new ways. How do you see all of this? I mean, as the business and side of it, the invention side of it, that somehow where humanity is being led, but then the people's is right versus the machine right. It's if there are
Yeah.
things like that, concepts like that. It'll be
That's
great
right.
to have your.
So I generally believe that we need better social systems. There is no question about it. And so I'll give you a few examples. So lots of countries in the European Union, as an example, have been thinking about and implementing actually 4-day work weeks, right? Where they say you don't need to work all days of the week. Like 5 days is passe now. We'll only do 4 days. And some of them are even talking about 3-day work weeks, right? There are actually cities here in the US that have started giving out universal basic income to people so that you don't have to go fight for your livelihood. They will take care of it. So I think that we are germinating these social experiments, right? A policy will take time, but I think that we have started running these experiments. And I think honestly, we have to sort of transition into a society that provides more of a safety net for workers and people. I don't think things like unionization are the best ways of doing that anymore. I don't think they're effective anymore because, as you said, a lot of the mundane stuff where unions were important to protect rights will is has continuously been mechanized. It's not that it's just happened now, right? It's continuously been happening since World War I and World War II, and that will continue to happen. So but I feel like we are finally running those social experiments that we need to figure out that is it the case that if somebody doesn't have employment, is it actually bad if they don't have employment but they are able to live a stress free life of dignity? Is that a bad thing? I don't think so. So I feel like we are beginning to ask these questions. We don't have the answers yet, but I think over the next 2 3 4 decades, hopefully by the time I die, certainly maybe before then, that we will have better social protections and better social customs and better laws and better frameworks to support people and not necessarily tie their employment to who they are. So that is generally what I believe has to happen in our society. And I am fully aware that I am saying this sitting here in the US, where even healthcare is a thing that can, put people into dire financial straits. So I fully recognize that things are not great, but I also am optimistic that we are beginning to run the right experiments.
I see. You mentioned about there was something about that was created the because of the new computers.
The
Um,
stellarator, the
yeah,
fusion, yeah,
the that it was as if it was science fiction. So you, as a
uh-huh.
scientist, how do you? What is science fiction to you? I mean, I'm sure it'll be different than a layperson's idea about science fiction.
Yeah,
What is science fiction for you? What is science? And then when it becomes fictitious, or
yeah,
science fiction is a platform where you bead, where you lay the seeds of ideas that you have today, but that which is
yeah,
beyond your might. Talk of Carl Sagan's, etc., who
yeah,
then said things which are almost becoming. We're almost there. I mean, but
Yeah,
great to have you look
yeah,
at science fiction from your vantage and insiders
yeah.
perspective.
Honestly, I grew up as a single child in Delhi, and and I wasn't a super social kid. I like to sit by myself in a corner with a book or with a computer, and I used to just guzzle science fiction. I used to love it. I still do actually. A lot of what I read is science fiction. What it means to me, right, is that the way I think about it is that it's a social playground actually. So, when you ask me about what must society do, and when I say that, hey, we have to run these social experiments, honestly, it's not my idea. It's just that whenever I read about abundant societies in the future, as they're described by our science fiction authors, they all have these kinds of systems in them. And so it is obvious to me that that is a good future. And for that to exist, we have to run these social things. That's number one. The second thing that I love about science fiction, personally, I love inventing new stuff, and nothing gives me more pleasure in life than thinking about an idea which is futuristic and science fictiony, and then making it work in real life. So, in fact, that is my life's mission: is to essentially build science fiction based stuff in the world and provide benefit to others in a way in which sort of it is also an economic engine of growth. That is what I want to do. That's why I exist. And so to me, science fiction is basically a cheat code. People have done the research, they have written these great ideas. I have to figure out how to implement them. I mean, how great is that? Is that I have a next to no intellectual burden on on myself. I just read a book. There's some ideas. I have to do is to figure out how to make them happen. So that's what it means to me. It's a cheat code in life, and I love it.
That's a good one. So within science fiction, there are those who also, consume science fiction, and those who generate science fiction. That's a fantastic addition to my, my understanding. Um, but do you also get to, or have you also added to science fiction, or you've been only you've never had the chance to get yourself freed from the ideas that somehow that was spurred by what you've read?
I am sadly not a
Fiction writer,
not a
science
not
writer.
a writer. Yeah, I'm not. Because the thing is, when you read science fiction, you realize that what makes science fiction great is obviously some tidbits of science in it, but these are all social stories, right? So like when you read I, Robot by Isaac Asimov, yes, it is about robots and it has the three laws of robotics and so on. But the fundamental idea of the book is actually about how people treat each other and how people will treat a robot when a robot is self-aware, and what rights will they have and how will they act and how will they prioritize. So like the interesting bits of science fiction are actually not about science. They're about people. And uh, and I think the drama that it requires for it to be interesting is just not that's not within me to produce.
I mean, talking of
But I, but I will say one thing, right, on your last question that you were asking about, things that were in science fiction that are a reality now. So Arthur C. Clarke, for example, in his science fiction writings, conceived of the satellite. And today we can't imagine a world without satellites, right? So that's a very like he also conceived of GPS, the global positioning system. So like there are so many things that we use like every minute of our lives now, which basically would not be possible without a science fiction author having proposed them.
right, who are your favorite science fiction authors?
Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke. Uh, there's this relatively less well-known author. His name is Alistair Reynolds. Really like him. There are so many good ones. Andy Weir is a recent one. So I read all sorts of science fiction. Like even if it's bad science fiction, I read it. So, but these are some of my favorites. They are really, really great.
What is
Greg
bad?
Egan.
Uh huh.
Sorry.
What is bad science fiction for you?
Oh, this will be weird, but bad science fiction is when the science fiction is about the science,
I see. Very interesting.
right? Because like I said, the thing that makes science fiction interesting is that there is just enough science in it that it can act as a literary device and a mechanism, but it's not fundamentally about the science. It is like fundamentally about some human story, like some arc of a character, of a protagonist. So there are many science fiction books that basically just become a wrong physics book, right, where they talk about physics but it is wrong and there is no human story, and then that's just boring.
Uh-huh. I see. And any stories that you can share with us? Your like something that has caught your imagination, that you have felt like being a child in front, listening or reading it.
Yeah, so I think honestly the stories that have had the most impact on me, given my work in robotics, are these stories by Isaac Asimov. He wrote a series of novels called the Robot series, and they are very intricately woven stories about people and robots and how they coexist and solve problems and get into problems. So I think those have had the most impact on me. They are just amazingly beautifully well written, uh, with with just the right bits of science in them.
And how, I mean, has any other fiction interested you, like spy fiction or others, or you're just like solely into science fiction?
I am solely into science fiction. I only read science books. Either they are like science books or they are science fiction books. I only read these two kinds of books.
I see.
Uh,
What about films? Any film, a series of films to do with science fiction that has interested you, or you
yeah,
time,
there are plenty.
or I mean,
Yeah,
a waste of time in the sense that because if you're an avid reader of science fiction, you need fodder. You're like an addict. You need things that will
that's
sort of stand you. So films are mostly a package, out of a book,
yeah,
some sexy package out of a book or two books
yeah,
that they put
that's
together.
right.
How do you see science fiction films versus the books?
Actually, I think generally it's hard to find good science fiction movies,
Hmm.
because typically kind of the plot devices that make science fiction movies interesting are hard to depict in a movie setting. There are some good ones, like there was this movie called The Martian. Uh, I
Yes.
think it came out a few years ago. I think it's a very, very good adaptation of the book. There's a movie called Interstellar,
Hmm.
in which actually they discovered some new physics while actually creating the movie. Kip Thorne, one of the consultants, was is a physicist, and so that was amazingly well made.
Yeah.
Uh, and even though you did not ask this, I will answer a slightly different question, which is that I believe that as a society we need to make more science fiction movies and more science fiction stories, because I feel like certainly it is the case in the US. When I came here and I met with sort of one prior generation of entrepreneurs, they basically tell stories about being inspired by the shuttle launch and by Neil Armstrong. And not only were these momentous events in this country's history, but sort of the propaganda that the US government did alongside these things, essentially public service TV programs about, oh, there's a shuttle launch now, and what does it mean? And it's going to enter this orbit, and its orbital velocity is blah and blah blah blah. Like the investment into inspiring people to do more science, I think has done more for this country than anything else that they've done. And I particularly feel that we don't do this in Indian media, and I wish there were more of it.
Yeah, that's it. I think I have, when I spoke of as a teenager of satellites and that, I also had spoken about the future of storytelling would be animation films. In fact, 3 years
Yeah.
when I said my homework is done, I'm now ready to get into the animation, but with a very different. I'm an ex-aviator, right? So there'll be plenty. Anyway, we'll talk about that separately. The project has begun. I'm now. People know that I'm working on something. It's a secret,
Okay.
how what I'm doing, etc. But I agree. As a filmmaker, as a documentary fellow, as an audio restorer, and so on and so forth, and an ex-aviator, I've thought about how storytelling. So for me, you venturing into that idea of things that you thought that I did not ask, but when I asked you if you were writing, so I am versed with that idea, and I'm sort of deep in it. I'm in that.
That's
I'm
excellent.
drowned in that wet sand, quicksand. I was
That's
lost in
amazing.
those ideas a long time ago. But so that's fantastic. I mean, what you mentioned about the idea of science fiction, and because spy fiction, for example, is a poor incarnation of the idea of fiction. It's not futuristic. It's spy is what? I mean, you have an enemy
Yeah.
and you're trying to win. I mean, that's the end of the story. The plot dies before it is even born for
Yeah.
addicts like me, and now that I see that even you and others. But where
But,
there is,
it's
you mentioned about
other problem
Interstellar, about
with like,
Martian. These are like
yeah,
frontiers, right? Even
yeah,
like old age, we grew with Star Trek, etc. That's stretching. That's stretching where it's not just about the idea of enemy and becoming
that's right.
every time becoming like a Pandava or a
Yeah.
Ram
You
or
know, that's
etc.
the thing I love about this science fiction, right? That it is not zero sum. It is
Yes,
not that only one party will win because the other party has lost,
yeah.
right? It is sort of we'll all grow together, and that optimism is infectious.
Is it for me? Values like curiosity, right? Enthusiasm,
Yeah,
curiosity. These are like I'm addict. I mean, I just get bored if you're not making me curious more and more.
yeah,
And for me,
that's right.
the frontier of science fiction, that technological blend of where humankind is headed, that is to the unknown. And I think we
Yeah,
start with an unknown, we end with a greater unknown. We start with a question
yeah,
mark, end up with a bigger, bigger question mark.
yeah.
Work done, job well done.
It's the
And
best. Exactly. That's the best. That's the best. You've
I'm
discovered
so
the next
glad.
question.
Say
Yeah,
that again.
absolutely.
I missed what you said about the question. I think we
No,
spoke.
I'm saying that's I'm agreeing with you that the discovery of the next question
Yeah, I see.
is the most pleasurable thing in life,
Yeah,
right? Because like if you discovered all the answers, then what's there to do? Then you're done.
yeah,
It's kind of boring.
yeah. I mean,
So yeah,
absolutely. Even when we look at from the Gurbani perspective, right? Um, there's a four vanis. Vani. There are four vanis. Expression, like
uh-huh.
human life, the ancient Indic idea of classifications, where
Uh,
the un, khani na pani, khani na bani, pauna na pani, upat khavat navan jani, as Guru Nanak also mentions. That there was no talks of the creation cosmology, how the creation occurred, the time when there was no khani, no life form, and they are
right,
classified as four life forms. There's under Jera Setuj Utpuj, the one that is born out of
right,
an egg, the one that is born out of water like we are, the one that is born out of humidity, and then that which sprouts.
yeah,
Life on the planet. So they're the four khanis. But then the four vanis are expression. The first is para, pashanti, madama, and bakari. So my locking horns with the philosophy people, old indigenous knowledge bearers and others has been that they're not four, they're one plus three. And for
yeah,
me, the fantastic thing is that, okay, para is that when there's nothing, right? They normally would translate as that when there is nothing. But Pashyanti is the origin of thought. right? Is
Yeah.
when you're talking about, the stealing ideas or copying ideas, consuming
Yeah.
ideas which are written. So those are ideas of Pashanti state, right? And then the third is the Madhyama, where the choice is made. I mean, how do you create a certain technology, etc., or satellite? It's all of that. Kidna banana hai? How do you? What form will it? If I'm to
That's right.
propel an aero object, okay, what's the purpose? It is to carry
That's right.
a 500 kg payload, right? What will it do? Am I sending flowers or seeds
Right.
to irrigate, or I'm sending chocolates to rain on Iraq, or I'm sending devastation, fire from the
Right.
skies? How long, where I'm sending it from? All of that. That's a Pashanta when you make those choices. Bakery is the actual production stage. When
Yeah.
I'm speaking is a bakery kriya. My intervention has been that there are 1 plus 3. Para
Yeah.
is the mandal of Nirankar. That's why there are no classifications. So there's no one, two,
Uh-huh.
three. So, but the mandal of Omkar, the creation, the
Yeah.
created space, is the origin of thought. The Omkar is the creation. When the thought occurs from the dormant energy to the proactive, procreative energy, that's the origin of thought. Oh, I can do. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Let's do this and let's do that. That whole madness of the Karta, Kartarpur, I
Yeah.
mean, how many stupid things that there are in the world. I mean, that guy is literally playing with new toys and saying, "Oops, I messed up." My little
Yeah.
conversation with the Kartapur is like the kind of fiction I write is that sometimes
Awesome.
small stories. But
Yeah.
Pashanti is the origin of thought. Interim, Madhyama is Madhyam, is the interim space where you make the choices. Vakri is how you render.
Yeah.
But the Para is the one, that question mark, which just we can't know. It's
Yeah.
Agam, it's Agad, it's
Right.
Agochar. I mean,
Right.
how that's why there's no I've never seen science as that, as an alien to that idea
No.
of seeker of knowledge, seeker of truth. uh,
Yeah.
I think it's a very Guru Nanaki etiquette, in the sense that which sort of
Yeah.
binds us to that question and the idea of
Yeah.
uh,
There is
but
a similar concept in math, and you have to tell me if this is too boring, and then I can
no, no,
maybe not go into detail.
go ahead.
But there's this important idea in math of a countably infinite things and an uncountably infinite reality. So, for example, when you teach kids to count, using their fingers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you ask them, till when can you go, right? How many things can you count? And they will say, I can count infinite things, right? I can never stop counting. I can continue counting forever. And so that is an infinity, right? On the other hand, imagine that, I ask my son to get me a half a glass of water. And so he gets me, zero point 0.5 of a glass of water. And then I say, you know what, I actually want half of that. So you know what, he can go drop some water and then he'll give me 0.25 glass of water. And the thing is that I can keep doing this forever, right? I can just keep saying that, okay, give me something smaller, give me something smaller, give me something smaller. And it turns out that, in this way of thinking about it, the number of numbers that exist between the numbers 0 and 1 is far greater than the number of numbers that exist when you go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that. So that one is called a countable infinity, right? So it's kind of a knowable infinity in some sense. And one is called an uncountable infinity, where it truly is, goes forever, and there is no numbering system that you can attach to it, right? So kind of this boundary of what is knowable, like even though ideas are large and infinite, but like one of them is knowable and somewhat within grasp and the other is not, is similar to what you were just saying.
That's fantastic in the sense that I'm a percussionist as well. In fact, I head the oldest school of percussion of South Asia that exists. There's no other school that
Uh,
goes back to era of Guru Nanak. Um, there are certain concepts. In fact, the philosopher, former professor of philosophy, the late Professor S.K. Saxena from their university, he rewrote his essay on rhythm and aesthetics, which was written for the British Journal of Aesthetics in 19 whatever 76 or 5. He rewrote it in 2011. The book before he died was published in 2011, and he
Uh-huh.
looked at the idea of willed waywardness, the idea of dignity that brought in. So there were a lot of philosophic interventions that he thought I was making by way of my research and digging out stuff from the Amritsari systems, the Darbar Sahib Parampara. So you thought I could be bored, but this is fantastic. So um, lay. So, for example, we establish a thadi lay. So it could be a
Right.
beat. We establish ik, ik.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, ik. Now this ik could be ik, ik. Anything that you establish, just establish one pace. Your freedom to
Right.
establish the first one, and so you create that. All right. So when you do, let's say the progression, the plus, um,
Yeah.
combinations, there is again a boundary. Um,
Yeah.
for example, if I, depending on the pace that I do, as a human paraphernalia of the talu, jibya, danti, oshti, mordhani, nasika, nasika, niranasika, the 8 parts of my vocal organ,
Uh,
my expression. Um,
uh-huh.
there is a limit to, let's say, if I were to say dha, dunge, nat, treta. So dha, dung, dung, na. So dha, this is tha, bass. And then the progressions become dha, dunge, nat, treta. Kai, trak, de, te, dha, ge, dha, ge, dha, ge. Dha tit tit ta ke trikd tikta trikd tikta ke na dhit dha ke trikd tikta trikd tikta ke na dhit da di ta da di ta dha dun de ta kd tikta de ta ga na ta de ta ga na ta de ta dar de te kd da dun ta kd ta de ta kd ta de ta ke de dha kd ta de ta ke de dha kd ta de ta ke de. Now the pace would be I cannot go faster. So that's like
Right.
32 times or 16 times depending on the beat.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
now the negative, ਉਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਇੱਕ term ਹੈਗਾ ਸਾਡੀ ਪੁਰਾਣੀ ਪਖਾਵਤ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, we don't see it used in any other system. In the Darbar Sahib di Parampara, we call it tha di tha. That is, tha is the minimal, the base, but then the
Yeah.
system. So when you go the positive multiple, it's called 1.5 times, it's a quarter times,
Uh-huh.
one and three
Okay. Yeah.
quarter, it's 2 times, it's 1 and 3.5 quarter. I mean, there are multiple
Yeah.
things that we do. The idea of bringing 14 and 12 or 13 and 12, 12 and a half and 12, 16 and 12. I mean, all kind of complexity, right? It's there, but it's definitive.
Yeah.
But the tha, there's no categorization. It's like the para. Because
Yeah.
that, for example, slow karna hai. I could say dha. I could go and sleep. I could
Right.
go and come up in 2 days and say dung.
Right. Right.
That extension can go infinitely. I could say now, I'll say, okay, I'm starting a tal, and the second
Right.
beat will come just before I die. So then
Right.
measure the tal which it is. Now
Right.
that would be so for me. It's very exciting what you just said, that
Right.
between 0 and 1, everything happens,
Right.
right? And
That's right.
zero is that which it is, which isn't, and it is not established. So if you
That's
thought
right.
that I would be bored, I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Yeah. No, I think it turns out I think there are some lots of beautiful ideas in math that are kind of easily philosophized.
Hmm.
And I generally feel like math needs better marketing. Math has terrible marketing. Math
Yes,
needs better marketing.
especially in America.
Oh yeah, it is. It's horrible. It's horrible.
Yeah. Progression, if you, for example, to give you a vocal example, that how we see as from coming from the ragic and talic worlds, If I were to take, let's say, two notes or one note, how many combinations can I make? Sa, there's only one. If I have two notes,
Right.
sa, re, re, sa, but the idea can be sa, re, re,
Right.
sa, re, re. So if I were to establish which re, this can also be infinite. But then if
That's
I
right.
take three, hi, re, gai, so just these three notes, how many combinations I make? Our ancestors, grand elders have created. I'll make six combinations. So za
That's
re
right.
ge, za ge re ge, za re ge, za ge re za, six done. So if I were to add
Right.
four notes, sa re ga ma, I'll make 24. So our system was
That's
1
right.
into 2 into 3 into 4. That's 24 combinations.
Yeah.
And it's not mere talk. So we
That's
will
right.
go, ah, za re ga ma re za ga ma za ge re ma ge za re ma re ge za ma ge re za ma. Six done. Za re ma ge re za
Right.
ma ge za ma re ge ma za re ma za ge ma re za ge. 12 done. Za ge ma re ge za ma re za ma ge re ma za ge re ge ma za re ma ge za re. 18 done. And then
Yeah.
re ga ma sa ge re ma sa re ma ge sa ma re ge sa ge ma re sa ma ge re sa 24. So the first is sa re ga ma, 24th is ma ge re sa, and in between there are 22 others. So likewise,
Right.
seven notes are 5040 tans, and I'm taught like
Right.
these things we've done, I've done over. But now, out
Yeah.
of 5040 combinations, I want to change the intonation of only one note.
Right.
So I do 5039 tans in different combinations in a particular raga. But then the
Yeah.
5040th tan, I make the nikhad flat.
Yeah.
Now that journey of that Komal nikhad across the 5040, you will have to multiply it by that much. So that's the kind of
Yeah.
combinations I can create. So
And
then
maybe
I did a
maybe
brain
the
of the
same.
the Indic musicians and the mathematicians say the same side.
Right.
Now I hope you have a reference now to.
And honestly, the same thing happens in linguistics, right? So if you think about, the English language as an example, we have 26 alphabets, and we have, like, we can express anything in these languages, right? We have these words, blah blah blah. But you can look at Polynesian languages, and they don't have as many consonants. They have very few consonants and very few vowels. So if you, like, for example, if you look at old Hawaiian names, things like Honolulu, right? Like, they repeat the same sound over and over again to impart meaning to them. So, like, in some sense, right, all of these are systems of thought. There is a grammar, right, which is how you can combine them together. And these are just systems of thought. And there is sort of deep equivalence in all of these systems, right? In language, in computer science, in algorithms. Uh, and so, by the way, this is also one of the reasons why I don't think of machine learning and AI as anything alien.
Hmm,
Like, we do it anyway. Like, these are the basic things that we follow in our life, these grammars, these lexicons, that are different, but yet not that different, in all these different areas. Like you said, if you only had four notes, similar to like a Polynesian language having a smaller number of consonants,
hmm.
you would just create different things, but you would still be able to express all the beauty there is to express using just a smaller number of consonants and making the words longer and the sentences longer.
Right. Right. And friends, I know that there are several comments and questions coming in. Please continue to write. I'll be addressing those, sharing them with Gurjeet to respond to. So kindly write down your questions. We will come to that. I now want to, before I go to your previous, when I was introduced to you, of course, my elders and your elders have known each other so dearly well. And
Yeah.
Mayank Bawa and who introduced me to you. Of course, there was, in fact, the gadget that your dad brought and mom brought for me is the one which is mounted on the under the camera.
This is clearly far superior than the gadget I'm using.
Oh, of course, I am. You can't beat me in certain aspects. You may be a great mathematician, a great scientist, but I'm also a ruthless being in my world. So, I take all the compliments. Compliments are all well taken. So, uh, but I want to, you were in a total different avatar, a phase of life where you had a company that had been running. But I want to maybe in the conversation that I want to have with you, the second part of this in the next days, I will want to, I will request you to run through your previous, experience and your findings
Sure.
and all that you incorporated and the methodologies you devised. Would be great to, and I've requested you for some of the visual
Yeah,
of data that you may have. It'll be great to have
absolutely.
the presentation. But today I want to, um, in the next segment of our next phase of our conversation, um, your current work, which is the in vitro fertilization.
Yeah,
Um, how is it? I mean, I've heard you speak about one of our conversation when you mentioned that it's a three attempts are made for fertilization,
yeah,
and when you're bringing in robotics within that, are you sometimes I wonder, are you sort of just making it's just the technological advancement just like that, or is it that some sort of efficiency is also being gained in terms of the attempts, which are at least three attempts or an average that were made
yeah,
to have to fertilize the egg and all that. But the
yeah,
questions apart, tell us about. I mean, take your time. Tell us about your the idea of the history of IVF and what you
yeah,
saw and the lack thereof, and where
yeah.
you decided to intervene and what is it that you're contributing and therefore.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I talk about IVF, there is one story from my previous company that I think is formative to sort of where I am today that I want to tell. So, we were in our previous company, we were still very young when this happened. We were four or five people, maybe. We were still in a small garage, sort of very mythical Palo Alto garage
I see.
that we were in. And we had built an original sort of version of our software. And the one of our first customers was this pharma company. I will not name them, but they were a very large pharma company, or a large pharma company, and they had a drug that was failing phase 3 clinical trials here in the US. And just to give you a sense for economics, right, when a pharma company reaches a stage where they're attempting a phase 3 clinical trial, they've typically spent 2 to 300 million dollars in running trials and tests and so on. So it's a very expensive endeavor. And it turned out that they were running a phase 3 clinical trial and they failed. And they failed because the FDA told them that your drug, the action, the mechanism by which it works, is not differentiated. It is not different from other drugs on the market. So we cannot let it pass. There's nothing novel that it does. And the nature of our software in my company was that it basically was built to help a human operator discover information in complex data that they might have overlooked. Because when data sets become too large, our ability to ask the right questions in the data sets is greatly diminished. So that's what our software used to do. So they used our software on the data that they already had, and they ran it on that data, and they discovered that there was a subgroup of people, a significant subgroup of people, on whom the drug worked, but the mechanism by which it worked was different from the mechanism for the other drugs on the market. So like within 3 or 4 months, they were able to kind of reformulate their data to the FDA without collecting new data, and the drug passed. And we were ecstatic. There were I don't drink champagne, but like there was Diet Coke flowing everywhere. Everybody was happy, high fiving, balloons, everything, the whole shebang. And I met with the senior vice president at the company, and they were like, we are super happy. This is great. You've saved. a great investment of ours. What do you want? And I was 29, something like that back then, and the biggest number I could think of was $1 million. I said, and I had never asked anybody for $1 million. So I gathered up all my courage and all my wits, and I said, look, we've done something great for you. We want $1 million for 3 years, right? $1 million per year for 3 years. And the guy didn't blink an eye, said done. We signed the deal. Everybody was happy. And a few months down the line, their drug passed. And I realized that in addition to saving $300 or $400 million of investment, they are now going to be making $1 billion a year from the drug. So I learned a few lessons from this. Right, I learned a valuable lesson that they were sitting on a gold mine, right? But they didn't know that there was gold in it. They had the data, but without sort of the software that we provided to their operators, they would not have found uh, what was hidden in it, which essentially ended up being very useful. The second thing that I realized was that I mispriced, right? For a $1 billion outcome, I basically asked for $1 million and I got it, right? So I mispriced my product. And the third thing that I realized was that I personally was very resentful about it. I shouldn't have been, because I got what I asked for, so it was unfair. But I was very resentful about it. And the fourth thing that I realized, that it was a momentous occasion for everybody who worked in our company, right? Like we could all walk around, proud, and our chests, thumping our chests that, hey, look, we made this thing happen in the world. It's going to help people. And there was nothing that could beat that feeling. So, now with this as a backdrop, and now 10 years pass by, I've sold my previous company. And I think to myself, what are some of the best memories I have from my previous company? And that memory comes to mind. And I was like, okay, so I want to do something in healthcare, because there is nothing that comes close to sort of the feeling of making a positive change in people's lives. There is nothing that comes close to that feeling. uh, and I knew that I wanted to use machine learning, because honestly that's the only skill I have, and so I had to use machine learning. I don't really know much else. And then the third thing that I realized was that I wanted to build a vertically integrated business, right? I did not want to sell tools. I wanted to build a vertically integrated business. And so, okay, so now I'm on a, I've sold my company. I'm looking at what to do next. Okay, I have this epiphany that, okay, this is kind of the rough space where I want to be. And then very coincidentally, I discover that somebody that my wife knows, somebody in her office, was having trouble conceiving. And, she went through 6 cycles of IVF, paid $45,000 a cycle, was still unsuccessful, right? So now she has spent $275,000 or $270,000 on this procedure, and basically had to file for a bankruptcy, right? It completely ruined her life. And then when I started looking into asking basic questions like, why was it expensive? Why did it take you 6 tries? Why didn't somebody tell you after the third or fourth try that, hey, maybe it's not going to work out for you, don't spend more money? And the answers that I found were not good. I essentially came away with a feeling that she got cheated. And she was not in a financial position. Nobody is, but in particular, she was not in a financial position where she deserved to be cheated at all. And then, very coincidentally, I ran into my co-founder Sahil. He's also from Delhi, and it so happened that he runs a bunch of IVF clinics in India and Nepal. And so I was like, man, I want to come see your clinic. I want to see how this happens. And I want to see why this lady failed. Like, what happened? So I came to India and saw one of his labs, and I was shocked, because I thought this would be like a futuristic operation. But this was like a dispensary with compounders running in the background with vials and petri dishes and syringes. It was so manual. And I was shocked. I was like, maybe this is special in India, and if I go to a lab in the US, then things would be better. So I understood how the procedure is done. Then I came back to the US and I went to a lab in the US, and it was the same. I mean, the lab was a little cleaner, but it was the same stuff. Like, they were moving around with vials and petri dishes and injections and syringes. And so then we started looking into the data, and I realized that the this procedure is very dependent on the technician. And a technician looks under a microscope at cells which are tiny. They are 5 microns in size. They're tiny, and they make subjective decisions. And if you look at the variance in the results, it is due to poor decision making that happens in the lab. Not willfully, they're not bad people. It's just that they're looking at so many things that, if you have to select, I'll give you an example. So, like, for example, if you have to select one sperm cell in a typical semen sample, which has 100 million sperm cells,
Yeah.
so you have to pick one sperm cell to fertilize an egg. The chances that you will do it well consistently are just not, it's statistically not set up for people to do well. So then we had the epiphany that, okay, look, we need to reinvent the IVF lab. And if we reinvented the IVF lab, that we could make the probability of success higher. Some people's genetics are unfortunately never going to lead to them being successful parents, and that's something that we can't do anything about. That's just nature. But for the vast majority of people, we could dramatically increase their success rates. So that was the genesis behind Thread Robotics. And so then we started building our robots and started trialing things. And since I did not want to sell tools again, we said we are going to start our own clinics. We started our first clinic earlier this year, and it's doing very well. And so far, everything is on the up and up.
Fantastic. So, what are your interventions um, so far? I mean, are you one, of course, you noted um, the cleanliness idea. That's one. You saw wires
Yeah, that,
and people, too many people, and you are from robotics, so you are making interventions there. Only having
yeah.
as many people as really necessary. Fair enough. That logic is
It's actually less about the number of people.
yeah.
So we are not really modifying the number of people, right? So we are so to our earlier line of questioning, we are actually keeping the same number of people that everybody else keeps, but it's about helping them make the right decisions.
Hmm.
So the bits of technology that we have developed thus far essentially intervene at the microscope level. So we've built a machine learning or an AI based microscope that essentially highlights the right cells for them to pick for the procedure. And so that reduces the variance in the procedure so dramatically that it can increase the success rate of the procedure.
So how does the software that you've generated, the technology, how's that technology or that eye, that intelligence
Yeah.
able to discern between a cell over another?
Yeah. So like I said, right, it's a machine learning system. So what we did is that we bought samples from existing clinics. We looked at them under the microscope, we imaged them, and then we have an army of embryologists, of these lab technicians who are labeling the data for us. And our machine learning algorithms mimic their consensus. So if we have, let's say, 10 embryologists and 7 of them agree on the characteristics of these cells, that's what we're trying to mimic. So it's a mimetic. And so that's what we are doing. We are essentially creating this ginormous amount of data, and we're feeding it to these algorithms to train them to mimic the consensus of the best lab technicians consistently. Consistency is the key.
I see. That's fascinating. Uh,
Yeah.
that's fascinating. And
Science fiction, right? I get to tell people that we are creating robots to make babies. I mean, I don't know if something could be cooler than creating robots to make babies.
That's
you know,
sattvic use of technology. That's a good use of.
right?
That's you're safe, Gurjeet.
Yeah.
When I kidnap you after you land in Delhi, you're only going to a nice coffee place, not in a cellar that you'll be lost forever. That's good.
Yeah.
So coming to the logistics part, I mean, the one thing that you mentioned about your friends, your wife's friend who went bankrupt, and so on and so forth. So already sort of finding a solution which doesn't loot people or doesn't destroy them financially.
Yeah.
That is one
That's right.
which I can understand at the very onset that you are trying to find, to help. But then over the, you mentioned about that there were errors made, and the reason why after 6 tries there was no child, the impregnation did happen. The what are the what is the outcome now that you're looking at? What sort of benefit your intervention has made in number of, let's say, is the number of tries from 6 or 4 or 5 come down to
Yeah.
less in terms of finances? What are the
Yeah.
collaterals that you are seeing now?
So, yeah, I think that's a great question. So, I think one thing that we have done already is that we have reduced the prices. So, we are now the cheapest, most affordable IVF program in the US. So, our prices are half the median price of the service in the US already.
I see.
That's number one. Number two, on the effect that it has on success rate, that is a number I can't state publicly at this point.
I see. Uh-huh. So off the record, you've told me that still stands, or even that was a lie, or a lie in the sense, quote unquote lie in the sense that was a corporate lie.
No, it wasn't a corporate lie, but I can't state it publicly
No,
yet.
that I'm not stating either, but I'm asking you. But is that the number that you mentioned to me
That is the number.
when
Yeah,
still the Stone Age? Okay,
yeah. It's
that's that's
it's it's
that's
a it's a valid number. Yeah,
uh-huh. And in terms of the politics of the embryo, uh, the kind of interventions which are being genetically, modified. In India, at times, the abortions or female feticide or sex
yeah.
sort of
Discrimination. Yeah,
determination had to be banned because of and we
yeah,
sardars were at the forefront. ਚੱਕ ਦੇ ਫੱਟੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਚੱਕ ਦੇ ਮਾਰ ਦੇ ਕੁੜੀਆਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਜੰਮਣ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ. So that was
yeah,
horrific. My elder
yeah,
brother-in-law, who's a bureaucrat, Inderjeet Singh IAS, he was in Punjab on deputation, and he, in fact, all the data which was at one time being referred to by everybody in the 90s was generated by him. He was very, very passionate about that. He's now, in the center in the government of India. He's the secretary to the government of India at one of the ministries now. So I'm
uh-huh.
versed with that, the idea of, the way interventions and abuse of technology to do that. How do you foresee that with a lot of, when they are making interventions about preventing a sort of, even preventing a special child from being born. That is, do you see the technology where you are, where people, even when they can have a child by themselves, would want to use the technology to determine, which cells and which sperm cell and egg and etc. Is it where we are headed towards, and how, if at all, do you see that a prospect?
Yeah.
I'm not even using the term
So
ethics here right now because
yeah,
it's too early
totally.
for that for me, at least for me.
Yeah, totally. So let me give you the context before I answer the question. Right. So the context is when you think of fertility, there is an important number. That number is 2.1. The number 2.1 is the number of children that a woman must bear, in an average woman must bear in a country to keep its population stable. Okay. And as you can expect, in most of the first world, we are teetering just at about 2.1.
Yeah, my in-laws, my wife is an Italian. It's below. It's
Yeah,
the yeah. It's
that's
minus.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Similarly, in countries like Japan and South Korea, far more people die than are born every year, right? So those societies and those cultures are on decline from that perspective. Okay, that's one. That's one important number, 2.1. The second important number is 15%. 15% is the average incidence of infertility in women. Okay. So 15% of all women will suffer from some infertility issue in the course of their lives. Okay. So now 15% is actually not bad, right? And the number 15% is very stable, right? It's not like a higher percentage of women are, facing infertility now than they faced in the past. That's a very stable number. But societally, certainly in the first world, we are having kids later on in our lives, right? And that means that they have fewer eggs and of lower quality, which makes fertility a problem for them.
I see.
There's a third number, which is 2%. So, on an average, in a fertility institute or a clinic like ours, roughly 30% of all cases are due to male factor infertility,
Hmm.
right? And that number 30% is increasing at 2% a year, and for unknown reasons,
Yeah,
across ages,
something
across demographics.
there was something in the Senate as well. Somebody had presented the idea that by
Yeah,
2050 or something, the sperm percentage or whatever the
yeah,
technical that will be none. I mean, they'll not be able to produce children.
that's right.
That's where the
Exactly.
men are headed. Yeah,
So, over the next decade, a dramatic shift is about to happen. Over the next decade, men are going to become a bigger factor in infertility than women. We are going to have fewer children naturally because, as I said, societally, women are having kids later on in our lives, and men are having an increasing amount of fertility issues. And by the way, the situation is particularly worse in equatorial countries.
interesting.
Uh, and so, now with that backdrop, right, the my sort of thesis is that artificial reproductive technologies such as IVF are going to become the default way of producing children in the future because it is a more predictable way of getting to children, right? And nothing against having sex. I think that's great. I'm a huge proponent of it, but that's not going to be the default way of having kids anymore because it's just not predictable enough. So, I think with that backdrop, now when you think of now to, come back to the ethical questions here. So again, I think this is a question that the society at large has to answer, and we have to ask ourselves. But when you think of embryos in this setting, right, typically you might create n number of embryos. Let's say you create 5 embryos, and but people typically don't want 5 kids, right? So you're going to implant them one at a time, and then hope that some of the implantations succeed. So in this setting, you are going to make choices, right? You are going to make choices about which life do you bring to fruition and which life do you not bring to fruition. There is that fundamental choice is embedded. There is no way out of it. So now the question is, what kinds of questions are we allowed to ask about it, right? And the question about gender selection is a very, very pertinent question. I believe, and now this is where it gets subjective because we have to make these are subjective decisions. There are no the laws here are still early and not fully well formed. So subjective, my decision, right? My opinion is that we should not select for gender, right? That's my opinion. But if I ask about if genetically we are able to determine that some embryos have a have a genetic predisposition to heart disease, or have a genetic protection from cancer of some sorts, or have a genetic predisposition for a lower cholesterol. I feel like those are choices that should be made in the way where we can produce healthy people.
So I mean, I call it disease combing of embryos. We are
Yeah,
I haven't. I mean, I don't know if that term exists, but I have called it the disease combing of
yeah.
at that stage, and it also brings us to the idea. If you may, please continue. But the idea of, for example, the church has been so opposed with the idea
Yeah,
of abortion rights. 6 weeks or 3 months, whatever. I mean, there's always a point when the heartbeat starts and blah blah blah.
I know.
Do you
It's
think
a
that will
societal decision.
now the church is going to, or various kinds of church are going to somehow become more literate about it, and they will start intervening or having an opinion about embryos, about what happens at the embryonic stage? What are your thoughts?
So,
Or if there are within the
so
field, if you guys within the field are grappling with these questions already?
yeah. So, look, I think, let me again say something about childbearing. Childbearing is such an innate and desperate need that everything is fine and dandy until it comes to your own progeny, right? So there are, for example, Italy, right, where you are familiar with the country. For example, in Italy, it is not legal to have a surrogate bear your child, as an example. And the Christian sort of um, leadership, right? That's the right word. So Christian leadership in the country has also placed relatively severe restrictions on what is considered legal and what is not considered legal. Same with Germany, as an example, right? And but what happens, right? If people have infertility and they want to conceive, what do? They go to Spain. They come to the US. They go to Israel, right? So there is no stopping people from having kids if they are desperate for a kid.
Yeah.
There is no church, no religion, no law is going to stop them. So that's number one. Number two, church. Sort of increasingly find it hard to disambiguate between the political narrative of religious leaders versus their actual thoughts, because I don't subscribe to the idea that they are stupid. They are not stupid. They are smart people. Anybody who reaches a leadership position in any organization is typically not a stupid person. But you have to ask, what are they optimizing for, right? What is their aim? Who are they pleasing? uh, and so I find it hard to answer, whether they will change their stance publicly or not. But I think that they know what's going on. They know that they can't stop their people from seeking fertility treatments when they're desperate for a child. That is plainly obvious to them.
Right, right. But it's it is. I mean, on one hand, it is a great prospect. The kind of immigration that has been happening, the um, in Europe, for example, the kind of phobia against immigrants on one
Yeah.
hand is there, but people normally do not understand that labor, even economy, it's not just about population. It's to do with the fiscals of a
Yeah.
nation,
It's
the
a movement of
GDP.
money. Yeah.
And we've seen that as people get more educated, they are doing less and less of small work,
Yeah.
labor-oriented work. They don't want like I would, when we have a good household, flourishing household, we have servants. You're doing even water. You won't get water even for yourself. You have somebody to bring it to you, rather than that. And um, that's quite an issue with the idea of population, about fertility, about IVF, or the kind of issues in Italy and Germany, as you also added the intervention. But again, ethics. If I may now bring in the term ethics, even from a scientist's perspective, um, this combing, you've answered one part of the question where you were okay with the idea of identifying which embryo, if you find that
Yeah,
means you're running tests already on them. And that's a soft genetic modification where even if you're not modifying a
it is
cell, but
selection.
you're making a
It
choice
is
that, okay, not this,
it
but
is
this child.
selection. Yeah,
Select.
absolutely. It is
That's what I
selection.
call combing, combing
It
as a
is. It is, and it is non
uh,
unnatural selection.
yeah. So that is again, we are changing humanity. We are the future. We are sort of going to become immune to even pain. We will stop understanding ideas. For example, you talk of what is fiction written when human experiences in retrospect will become fictitious ideas. When
Yes.
the people in the future, our coming generations will think things which were ordinary and normal life were actually fiction. The roles will be
Yeah.
totally reversed. It's like we are giving birth to fiction. We are allowing life for fiction to be the reality, and we, the ordinary, are now subject of being fiction, of being
Totally.
fictionalized. Yeah.
But
That
I will say it is a prerogative of all future to consider all past as fiction,
Well,
right?
I know.
That's
I agree.
generally
I wouldn't call it a fiction in the sense that experiences that are no longer there. For example, a Persian wheel. I mean, okay, it's good to know that this is how we took water from well. But
yeah,
now we don't run a camel or a bullock outside, but sometimes we can have it somewhere, but I don't do it. That's not really turning
yeah,
it fiction. It's just, I understand the sentiment, but not
yeah.
perhaps the way you said it, but I understand that idea. But again, the idea of combing is modification, is a sister of genetically modified, where we make preferences, or you use the terms selection. That's 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 one. So let us look at the first question which Nihal sent to me. He's one of my students from Maryland. He's from UC Berkeley, your enemy. And he studied political philosophy.
No, good friends, not enemy. Good
I'm
friends.
kidding. I'm just teasing. He's, he says, according to the internet, your work in topological data analysis began while you were a graduate student in Stanford's mathematics department, which you subsequently built upon at ISD.
Uh-huh.
Um, were the technological and enterprise applications a pleasant surprise, or did you study mathematics with an eye to its relevance for developments in machine learning?
So as a person who's not super smart, most of the good things in my life have been accidental.
I see.
And so honestly, I'll tell you the reason why I started studying math is I grew up in India, in Delhi, and I kind of was good enough to get into engineering and finish engineering. But I was always scared of math. That was like I was deathly afraid of math.
Hmm.
And so, after spending about a year in TI, my Texas Instruments, right, where I got a job there after my undergrad. Uh, I was looking for programs in the US where I could study computer science and mathematics, and my logic was that if it turns out that I do suck at the math, like if that is out of my league, then I'm sure the computer science will be fine. I can code my way out of anything. So okay, great. So I came to the US, came to Stanford, and I was studying in Andrew Ng's lab in the CS department here at Stanford. Andrew Ng is a world famous machine learning and AI researcher and professor. He's amazing, and so I actually built a multi-legged robot in his lab. And I realized that when I was building that robot, that every system that I had, like vision, I had to read a different book about vision and then learn about vision stuff. and then try to apply it. Motion, I had to read a different book about motion, figure out how motion would work, and then apply it to the robot and then make it work. And I was deeply unsatisfying because I felt like these are all connected things. They're just called with different names. And very serendipitously, my PhD ultimate advisor, Gunnar Carlson, he sent around an email to the department saying, "Hey, I'm looking for graduate students, and my work in topology is about unifying sort of the representation of data and models." And that was immediately attractive to me,
Hmm.
and also scary because I knew nothing about topology or algebra that was required to do it. So now to answer the question with this long-winded background,
No, no.
I I I basically started studying topology, and very serendipitously, it turned out that one of the first algorithms that we built had a very visual outcome. It's something that you could throw data into, and it would turn data into these very pretty charts that were interactive, and people could learn from, and they could interact with, and manipulate. And one of the first users of that piece of research software was this lady, Monica Nicolaou. She was doing her project in the Stanford School of Medicine in cancer research. So she had a very old cancer data set called NKI, Netherlands Cancer Institute. So she took that breast cancer data, threw it into the software, and accidentally discovered something new in that data that nobody had seen before, and was able to publish a paper in Nature, which is a very prestigious journal as far as science goes. And so that really kickstarted sort of the ultimate evolution of it into something that would become commercial. And then, we lucked into a few other applications. We lucked into an application in image compression, into econometrics and protein folding. And then DARPA, who had funded my PhD, essentially encouraged us to commercialize it. And so it was just this series of happy coincidences that led me down the path of conceiving of a company, and then building it, and then succeeding with it and failing with it, and
And
succeeding with it and
just
failing
getting
with
$1 million a year for 3 years. Come on.
it. And in retrospect, it is not even chump change. Yeah.
And you eventually sold it for how much? Is there a public?
It is a very private number.
Acha, nothing has been reported of that.
No.
I see. Okay. And the new one that you have, you started in. You took a sabbatical after that, or you you
I
immediately you already like
no,
from pan into the
no,
fire.
no. I took a year off,
You did.
and I basically, part of the downside of a company is that a lot of you have to spend all of your passion and energy into building it, because it's very, very difficult. It involves a lot of failure to build a company.
Very good.
And so sort of the one key component of the life that suffers is sort of how much time you are able to give your family.
Mm.
And certainly, I think my family, my parents, my kids and my wife, they were certainly very neglected due to my time that I spent at Ayasdi. And so not that a year can fix anything, but I took a year some time in Mexico, some time in Costa Rica, and just enjoyed with each other for a while. And then, as luck would have it, we started my company, Thread Robotics. And 2 months after it, the lockdown started. And so, over this past year, which has really been the first year that we've operated this company, we've done it as a remote team, sitting in our own homes, doing video conferences and building bits of hardware and shipping it around, and starting a clinic remotely. So it's been an interesting ride, but thus far it's been very successful.
I'm so glad. No, that's wonderful. And what are the, for, let's say I am a young graduate and I'm looking for um, funding and about to start a startup. So, what can you, with the experience that you had, and it was very poignant about the 4 or 5 things that you counted at the time from the from your previous avatar. Uh, what advice and what counsel would you give that budding entrepreneur? Uh,
Yeah. So I will say there are two important things. They are super important above everything else. The first important thing is that if you're going to build a company, you have to make sure that that's a problem, that there is a problem that exists in the world that you can solve. And I have suffered with this. Many of my friends have suffered with this. Many of the companies I have invested in or advised suffered with this. Is that oftentimes, entrepreneurs tend to be people who are good storytellers, and it becomes at some point hard to be truthful to yourself, and kind of, as they say in the US, not drink your Kool-Aid. And so what that means is that many times when people start companies, they think of a cool idea, but they don't do enough diligence on it to ensure that it is an actual problem that somebody has that will get solved. So that's number one. Make sure that the thing that you're going to solve is an actual problem where somebody will pay you money to solve it in one way, shape, or form.
mm,
That's number one. The second most important thing is that if number one is true, then you have to make sure that you actually like the area and you like the problem. Because any meaningful company, any meaningful effort will take a decade of your life at the very least. And for most of that time, you will be failing. For most of the time, things will not be working out. Deals will not be happening. You will not be able to recruit the best people. Your competitors will have better funding. The competitors will even look better as people. They will. So, like, for the vast majority of this decade, at least, that you're going to spend on this effort, you're not going to be succeeding. And so the only way that you can stay true to it, the only way that you can bear through the failure, is that if you're so deeply passionate about solving it, is that there has to be a wrong in the world that you specifically have to fix, that you have to right. And so unless the problem exists, number one, and your passion for the problem exists, number two, then it is not a good problem to go attack. Unless both of these conditions are true, do not start a company.
mm. Very, very informative. Um, about life, you mentioned about when you took that sabbatical, uh, and before you started this. How do you see life? What is life opportunity and responsibility? Is how do you see life from where you are?
Yeah, that's a that's a deep question. So the way I think about life, right? I think most most people at most times live their life by default.
Hmm,
They find themselves in a situation um, that they were put in by their elders, by their life, by their partner, by their friends, and then stuff happens, and they continue going on their way. Most people don't end up examining their life.
hmm,
So I think that is kind of a very important thing, is to examine your life. And personally, for me, the key thing that I realized at some stage was that the world that you live in, the people that you interact with, the rules, the laws, these are made up by other people
hmm,
who are no smarter than you are. So, in some sense, the malleability of your life, the malleability of the world is much, much higher, way higher than people think it is. And so I feel like that is an important realization. And personally, for me, that was a big sort of uh, big change in the way I think of everything and I think of life when I realized that. So now to answer the question, personally, the way I think of life is that I feel like I have a mission. My mission in life, as I said earlier in this talk, is to essentially bring about a utopic world by using science and science fiction ideas. That's what I want to do, to turn them into reality. These ideas, by their very nature, are ideas that will help people. That's kind of my selection criteria, right? That these ideas help people. These ideas require science, and these ideas require sort of execution. They require energy to be put into them, to be hatched into the world. And so that's how I think of life. That's my mission.
How do you weigh spirituality, or hesitantly, if I may use the term religion, but spirituality, morality, etc., in your life? How do you see them personally?
So I grew up in a deeply religious family, um, with a deeply religious family, very loving family, and I think something sort of peculiar or special about sort of my upbringing in this setting was that my father in particular, he does all the rituals. He does part at regular intervals, reads the Guru Granth Sahib, follows all the rituals and everything. But when I was growing up, I was still very young, I think maybe 6 or 7. He bought these cassette tapes from the Chinmay Mission, and Osho. And I remember, he used to listen to them, and I used to be, I was around, so I used to listen to them. And so a lot of sort of my understanding of the Guru Granth Sahib, and and kind of the associated um, meaning, basically came from the exposition from those cassette tapes. That's where I absorbed it from. So that was kind of the fundamental of sort of how I learned those things. But on a day-to-day basis, as I've spent a lot of my time learning math and learning science, a lot of my spirituality or spiritual thoughts now are more about how do I connect what I heard when I was young in those cassette tapes to what I'm reading now, right? So I find spirituality in those connections. I don't find them very often because it's hard, but I find that that's kind of the best way in which I can experience any form of spirituality. So that's what I think.
How is Gurjeet as a father, and what is what has fatherhood been for you?
It's been interesting. So um, I have two little kids. One is about to turn 10. The other is just turned 6, and they are very different people. And I think it's been a pleasantly surprising experience, also frustrating experience. Uh, and honestly, I had doubts whether I had before they existed. I had lots of doubts about what it would be like to be responsible for them and to care for them. And I've obviously come to care deeply for them and love them very, very deeply. um, and I honestly, I try my very best to teach them math and teach them science, which are the things that I found a lot of meaning in. um, and we go on hikes, we go swim together. I think I'm very grateful for the gifts that I have, and for the amount of time I'm able to spend with them, and for the people they will grow up to be, even though they are exceedingly frustrating, is is what I would say.
That is that is so sweet. Um, okay, so thank you everyone, all those who've joined. Principal Prem Singh, who headed the Arts College, Chandigarh Arts College, says more we go away from nature, less and less humans we would be. Um, he's one of India's top artists. Would you like to say something on that?
Yeah, I agree with him. I think the more we go away from nature, the less human we are. I totally agree with him. And I I try to spend a lot of my time out in the nature. Again, very lucky to live where I live because I can literally just walk out of my house and I'm at the foothills. We I was on a hike with my kids this morning. We went and hiked for about 3.5, 4 miles, and it's just beautiful. I think there is nothing quite like it. There is nothing quite like it. So I completely agree with him. And but I think that we it takes conscious effort to seek it out, and I have put in a bunch of conscious effort to seek it out, and I think I've benefited from it. And I honestly encourage everybody to go spend as much time in nature as possible, right? You know, play with dirt, play with mud, uh, and go, roam in the trees, roam in the forests. There's nothing quite like it.
Do you let them fight? Do you fight with them?
I feel like they attack me. I get attacked quite often.
You don't.
I, I don't think I can win any fight. My daughter, the younger one, she's a terrorist. I, you know, so I think we are at her mercy most of the time.
Okay. And somebody called Gursharan Beer, I think, and seeing him for the first time. Do you know him? Or somebody known to you, or somebody who's followed your conversation here? He says, Bhai Sahab ji, please let Gurjeet complete his line of thought. But, my dear friend, I'm a Fauji kid. I'm an aviator and someone who grew up, shooting pigeons with a double barrel. So his job is to shoot a pigeon, and mine is to shoot it as soon as I can. So sorry, I won't. That is not the advice I ever take, and I always give a mouthful of my own. Or I hope that served you well. Manjeet Kaur says, I agree with you. I don't know. It was very early on, so I don't know what she was agreeing with. But depending on the data we are talking about, just where are we? I see. So talking of the data, the kind of she's talking. And let's see if there are. Amarjeet Singh says the idea of science limited to steampunk tendencies was great. Now that we have artificial intelligence, where if you're using an iPhone, it knows what time I wake up, go to bed, what do I browse, etc. Use cookies to follow me everywhere. The worst part that it sells the data to companies that use artificial intelligence to flood me with adverts, spam offers, and sometimes it can go grossly wrong and hit a black hole and crash like a deck of cards. I would like to ask Gurjeet Paji, does watching a science fiction? Oh, so it's a separate question. But would you
Yeah,
like to address that part, the kind of
yeah.
phobia
I
now?
think
Of course,
yeah,
some rightly acquired phobia or some misconceptions,
absolutely.
stereotypes.
Look,
But would
I,
you
I think
address that? Yeah.
yeah, I think a deep skepticism of sort of the data that our devices hold and transmit and use is warranted. I think this is the right attitude overall. Personally, I think we have to kind of build a system so that we can thwart it. And so until we have policy systems and these companies sort of having better governance, we have to build our personal systems. So I will tell you what I do, and I would recommend you do something similar if you can. I use Apple products. I don't use Google products as much as possible. I don't use Facebook. I don't use Instagram. I don't use any other social media. I use Apple products because I like their stance on privacy. They don't want to sell me ads, right? So I can trust them with my data. And most of my data they don't actually even store. They keep it on device. They don't get a copy of it. So I like Apple in that regard. Second, from an internet perspective, I basically use VPNs to traverse the web, as well as I have a hardware ad blocking system. It's based on an open source project called Pi-hole that I have deployed at my home so that I can insulate my family from spurious ads, and it works wonderfully. So I think these are the three things that I do that I would recommend anyone who is capable of this should do to kind of guard their privacy and sort of be safe on the internet. But I'm in agreement with you. I think this is a problem.
Yeah. Gurjeet Singh, the one who was trying to lecture me, is requesting you. Can you tell us more about your work with AI, and maybe Paisab can help analyze on the basis of Gurmat?
Yeah, I can give you a few examples. So let's see here. So let me give you some context, and then I can give you two examples. I think that will be a good.
Mhm.
So the context is the particular type of AI that I am involved in. Topological data analysis is also a sort of what's also known as unsupervised machine learning. And when we say unsupervised, it means that it can discover information from data that you did not know existed in it. So I will give you one example of that. One of our other sort of line of businesses at my previous company, Ayasdi, was we used to sell into hospitals. And in hospitals, when a patient comes in for a surgery here in the US, and you ask a hospital system, how long are they going to stay in the hospital for? What's it going to cost? Will they be readmitted? Will they be fixed? Hospital systems don't have answers to these questions. It could cost you $5,000 or it could cost you $50,000. Like, it's very hard for them to predict. Uh, and similarly, like, will they be readmitted? Very hard for them to predict. So we developed a piece of software. We used to call it, care path management, where the software system analyzed hundreds of thousands of surgeries that they had done in the past. And for every kind of surgery and every kind of procedure that they offer to their patients, it would recommend, based on the patient, a personalized care pathway, which is, admit the patient, run these tests, administer this drug, do a nutrition advice, the whole pathway, like step by step by step for multiple days. So one of its early successes was one of the hospital systems here in the US. They're called Mercy Hospitals. They deployed it to better understand knee surgeries. And it turned out that in the same hospital system, there were a few physicians who used to have much better outcomes on knee surgeries. And our software was able to figure out that they had better outcomes because they were using a particular drug which was not indicated for knee surgeries. So they were using it off label, but it had a dramatically beneficial outcome on the patients.
Hmm.
So that's the first example. The second example is in my current company at Thread Robotics. So our first machine learning system helps find the best sperm cells to fertilize eggs. And so it is pretty magical, in the sense that if you look at a microscope, actually, let me see if I have one here. So this is kind of a test microscope that I have here at home. So if you look under a microscope, typically it has a light pipe, right? So like right here is a light pipe. You have to kind of put your eye against it and then look inside it. So what our machine learning system does at Thread is that it has modified the light pipe of a microscope so that when an embryologist looks into the microscope, instead of just seeing the cells, we also project an annotation on every cell. We say, okay, this cell has these characteristics. The head is the right shape. The mid piece is misshapen, the tail is too short, don't use this one. That other sperm cell, has the best head shape, has the best mid piece, the best tail, maybe we should use that one. So like it does this in real time. It's a very magical thing to witness actually. And it doesn't change the workflow of a lab technician, right? They are still looking under a microscope like they used to, but now they have all this extra information computed for them in a tenth of a second. That can sort of that has better outcomes. So those are two examples.
I see. And Amarjeet is asking, I would like to ask Gurjeet, does watching a science fiction can end up giving you a hallucinating effect? What's his idea about that kaleidoscope?
Well, yeah, I feel like life is a hallucination, right? There is, you know, so I'll give you a specific example, right? There are optical illusions. You can find them across the internet, right? Where the image, when you look at it, right, clearly is not what it looks like. Your brain interprets everything that it receives. So in some sense, reality doesn't exist. It's actually created by your brain. Actually, I'll give you a fascinating example of this. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. You know, if you remember a feeling, right? So sometimes when you listen to music, there's like a chill that goes down your spine, right? Like the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Like there's a chill. Like there's this sensation that essentially takes over your body. And so why does that happen, right? It happens because your brain wants two things. It likes complexity, it likes complex signals, right? So auditory complex signals, and it likes to predict. And so whenever it can predict the next thing that's about to happen in an auditory or an oral setting, you kind of feel that sort of tingly sensation all over. So that's what causes it. Okay, so here's the experiment. Now imagine that you're listening to a song, and you pause it, you just stop it somewhere, and you ask yourself, and there's an you ask yourself, what is the next note I'm about to hear? The vast majority of people will not be able to predict that note, right? They will not be able to state that note. So what's happening there, right? The fundamental reason why this happens is that there is one part of your brain that sort of makes these predictions, but the other part of your brain which vocalizes doesn't isn't aware of those predictions. So, in that sense, your brain has already made a decision about a thing that you're not aware of. So, a lot of the times when you ask somebody, why did you do X or Y? It actually turns out that the decision to act happens before the justification for action. So, in that sense, everything that you observe and take in is a hallucination. There is no objective reality.
Hmm.
So yeah, science fiction, any fiction, just existence is a hallucination.
Right. You've gotten several patents.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Tell us about some of them, the ones that are um the most important. Every patent is important. It is but sometimes there's some patents which come. They come by the way. They're on the road. You find solutions. They come, but there are some like that. That moment that you said that happens, euphonic, etc. So um,
I think I think the patent system, certainly in the US, is just weird. So a lot of the times when you file patents, you don't file them for your use of the idea. You file them to protect yourself from other people, suing you or coming after you or like building your technology. So I feel like patents is just a weird system which is misused uh, which is kind of misused, and it ends up being a tax on young companies. So like a company like ours, right, we spend so much money filing patents just to protect ourselves. So I will, I'll basically punt on that question. But I will tell you some sort of serendipitous things that happened to us, which were very useful. They're not quite patents, but I think will answer the spirit of the question. I already mentioned one regarding that cancer research. On one of our first uh,
Breast cancer.
uses of PDA, breast cancer research. Another one in a similar vein was around protein folding. So we protein folding is a very difficult problem. We don't proteins inside our body must be folded for them to function, and we don't yet have a way of predicting the folded shape of a protein by far. Like that's a hard problem. So another one of these serendipitous things happened where there was a simulation database of fold proteins going from unfolded state to folded state. And similar to the breast cancer work, the researchers threw the data into our software, crunched it, and discovered that there are multiple pathways for that particular protein to get to a folded state. And so again, that was a discovery that was hiding in their data that they would not have ordinarily realized without running the system through the software. So
Amazing.
that's another example of this serendipitous discovery.
Yeah, well, and you've published papers.
Uh-huh.
Um, the most important one. Why don't you share some?
Yeah. So the most important paper, again, serendipitously, was the paper that was the basis of my last company. It was called Mapper, and it honestly, it's something. The obviously writing the paper took a while, but the actual research that led to the paper was something that I think I did in an afternoon. My PhD advisor Gunnar, he basically gave a talk somewhere, and he was describing a general idea in the talk. And after the meeting, I realized that could be converted into software pretty easily. So I took inspiration from his talk and then started building it. And like I think within an afternoon, I had a prototype of the system up and running. And then within a week, we had this breast cancer result. And then it took a while to kind of write a paper about it and then get it published. But yeah, I feel like that was the most influential paper that I wrote because it had a huge influence on my life. And I'm grateful for kind of how that came together.
That's amazing. And are these like available? People can read, or
Yeah,
they are.
they're freely available. They're online.
Uh-huh. And HSBC experience, how important was, normally, I mean, sometimes I have counseled some of the youngsters that before you jump on to straight away doing business, out of college, straight to the fire, it's like never as a sculptor, we season wood as a weapons maker by bloodline. They fought the warriors and all that. They did their own stuff. Um, the tempering is very important. To work in an office setup in an important, if you can work for somewhere, you learn team ethics, you learn deliverance, you know what it is to work under someone. Those who are alien, who are not sort of relatives, that XYZ kind of protections you're not working under. That experience comes handy before you then to venture on into starting your own stuff. You will know what is it to lead a team, what is it to be led. You will be able to anticipate so much. And of course, at times you also learn the tricks of the trade, the small details of how to, for example, how to commercialize something,
Yeah.
how to like that was a, as I said, it was a very poignant storytelling that you were doing when they asked you what do you want, and if I may try and recollect what you said, to quote you, that you mustered all the number, all the courage to say $1 million in 3 years, right? And how is it? How was that experience? As as part of the technology advisory board that you were at HSBC, how do you count those areas? Like after college, I had that interim 1.5 year period, and I
Yeah.
was ahead in college, like 2 years ahead, and I had to
Yeah.
wait until I was like 19 and a half to apply for the Air Force to fly to get to
I see.
get to fly fighter. So I had Kikita, all us Fauji kids, we went and worked for some company. I won't take the
Yeah.
name, and we learned direct selling. Because the
Yeah.
advertisement was, oh, there are vacancies in Jammu.
Yeah.
you know, Fauji kids, we thought कि Jammu, next door, next stop is Srinagar, कमाल हो
Yeah.
जाएगी. So in
Yeah.
88, all of us, we applied, and this company, multinational company, they saw these Fauji kids who speak Angrezi like bud, 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 and
Yeah.
they said it's a lottery. So we were sent to Ludhiana for training. And these
Yeah.
Ludhiana bosses of that company fell in love with us, and they kept us in Ludhiana. And we were like, what for? Instead of our going to Shimla or to Srinagar every weekend, and our life at that time, pina shina, sab kuch hunda si, khana pina.
Yeah.
So we were thinking like that. We were like in the Millerganj area, we were like doing direct selling. But that idea of direct selling, like when I'm giving this demo to one of the munjals about
Yeah.
the product I was selling, that guy's shaving, this guy's no time, and I'm giving through, and he's watching me through the mirror. That is, the kind of
Yeah.
experience that you gain. How was it? Those formative aspects, those lessons, small, small, small lessons and etiquette that you learn, which you
Yeah.
then employed. How do you rate that time when you were working?
So, HSBC was actually after I started Ayasdi.
Okay,
So I got onto their board because they were a big customer of ours.
I see.
So, and I think I was maybe the youngest or the second youngest ever technology advisory board member they had. So I actually, honestly, I feel like the world has the opposite problem. Like I have lots of friends who work in, big companies and, forever have had the dream of starting a company,
Right.
but they just can't leave the comfortable life. Right. So I have the opposite. Like I give people the opposite advice that, if people ask me, how can I learn to start a company? And I'm like, there is no book. There is no, um, there is no path. There's no specific path. Every company has their own unique path. There are lessons that you have to learn, but you have to learn them. You can't read them or understand them without plunging into it.
Hmm.
So, in fact, when I started my previous company, Ayasti, I had only worked in a corporate setting for 11 months.
Hmm.
And that was at Texas Instruments after my undergrad before I came to Stanford. So, I had to learn everything. I made all the mistakes in the book.
Hmm.
And I feel like had I not followed that path, I don't know if I would probably have made different mistakes. I guess
Right.
is the best way of saying it. But I don't think it would have been a mistake free sort of smooth sailing path for me. Right.
Hmm.
So I think far more people are actually stuck without taking the next step
Hmm.
and dream of entrepreneurship without taking the first step, which is just start and see what happens.
Hmm.
Uh, so now to answer the question right about HSBC, my experience there was fantastic. I got to interact with a huge organization, with their board and their CEO and their high level executives. It was a very different company. My company was a couple hundred people, and they were, they had couple hundred people arranging lunch.
Hmm.
So it was a very very different experience. I met with regulators, with Bank of England, with with the World Economic Forum and so on. So it was a very very different, an amazing experience. I traveled the world with them for various things, and this is while I was building Ayasti. But I realized that I had a lot to learn about running and leading big organizations, and the way that they took decisions was very different. I remember I was meeting with their CFO about something one day, uh, and the somebody he uttered the words that, hey, look, our balance sheet is so big, that moving a couple $1 billion here or there doesn't matter. I'm looking at $1 trillion balance sheet, right? So just the scale at which they thought and how they took decisions was so different and so alien, that it was an amazing experience. Some of their board members are still my good friends, and some of them are investors in my current company. So I learned a lot, and it was an amazing, amazing experience.
I see. So that again, you sort of did both in the sense that the you also confirmed what I was saying, that you get to learn
Yeah,
those who are.
absolutely.
And I was, for a moment, I was, if you were to recall, that I was quite hesitant to ask you about it because I knew that you were on the technology advisory board, that you were
Yeah,
not an executive down at the micro level. So I was actually hesitant to phrase that question. But then my hope was exactly that
yeah,
the decimals, normally we are like not even the decimals to those guys as the kind of numbers they deal with
yeah.
is something. So that was very, very important insights that you share. Very, very. I hope that really helps. But the other aspect that you alluded to in the beginning was, I think, it's also very important. There are at times there are people who, like, I renounced my flying career without getting the first paycheck. And I
Yeah, it's
spoke
a
at
hard
age
thing to do.
18. At age 18, I said the era of cultural resurgence and renaissance is upon us, that we've hit
Yeah,
rock bottom. If, the question is, how do we recover as a community? Right? This is
right.
like later 80s and 84, etc. have just happened. And I was the only guy in the end who went into the indigenous pedagogical processes and knowledge systems. So I was hoping at the time there would be others. Like, so the to renounce a career without getting a paycheck, and everybody thought that I had gone bonkers. That, hey,
Yeah,
guy's gonna become some ragi now or a bhajan singer,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
that, who's gonna feed you? We won't feed you. I mean, there was the kind of common thread. But I jumped, right? I jumped straight in, and my own granduncles were shocked by Avtar Singh beggars.
yeah.
They were like, for 2 years, they thought that my family, my parents are going to come and fight with them, ke sada munda bigaadta. But then
Right.
I did not even make it Agija tha, because I'm here to conserve. I'm here to recover. I'm a conservator. I'm a digger, like a gold digger. I'm a knowledge digger, systems digger. So,
Yeah,
as I've argued, that if you want to talk of utopia, for me, as a protagonist, I am. It is from the ruins, that we have to sift through, comb,
yeah,
them, and then find the seeds that are Naniki seeds, as I call them, of Naniki civilizational seeds, ethical seeds, etc., etc. Even socio-political insights, the fight against hypocrisy and tyranny and greed, etc. Of what is sattvic, what is honest
yeah,
governance. What is actual governance, what is statesmanship. These kind of conversations that I had.
yeah,
So I empathize with. I know. I mean, I'm one with that. I mean, I jumped right in. I saw the ocean and I
yeah.
jumped right in. When I took the decision, I was in their headquarters. So both are very important. But then that idea
That's
of,
right.
when I came in here, that time post college and before I even got selected, that came handy, though. That small tricks that you,
Yeah,
how to give a demonstration to people, how to do direct selling, how to knock on a door. What is the different
yeah.
cold knock, like you did, in knocking on the cold door, looking for
That's
investors?
right.
I have an idea, but most people you find will shrug. Like I said
Yeah,
4 years ago, I'm ready to deliver. I'm ready now. My homework is done, so I'm ready to deliver animation films. Here I come. People said, "Ji,
yeah,
ki load hai animation film banandi. What is the need? There's so much which is being
yeah,
made.
yeah,
Have you seen that film?" And that's it. But that's not really animation. That's like an abuse of the medium.
yeah,
We need to make. I'm planning to make something that will pitch. That'll give Pixar and Walt Disney and some of the Japanese consortiums run for
yeah,
their money. I'm talking of that level. But then they would say, "Acha, bhai saab, why don't you make a demo 5 minute?" I said, "Are you crazy? Animation for even 30 seconds would cost,
yeah,
a serious one. I mean, when you're making a prototype, if you want me to tell you how I'm going to do, then I'll
yeah,
have to do the way I want to do. And to do
Right.
exactly that, I need maybe a couple of $2-3 billion just to do that. They say,
Right.
that's a little much, maybe we can put in $100,000. He said, that doesn't work like that. You want me to buy some bouquet. If you want to
Yeah.
engage a monster like me to work, you have to give the tools.
Yeah.
I think, what you mentioned about, to see turpo, even if you fall, if you hurt your toe, you will learn from that. It's learning
Yeah.
by the wire.
You will fall. You will fall. You will get hurt. You will fall. You will fail. And it's that is I mean, in some sense, right? This is the thing about entrepreneurship or risk taking, is that if you're not looking to fall, right? Like the learnings that come from failure are, success is a very poor teacher. You go, because you could have lucked into things, and very hard to say when you're successful why you're successful. But dissecting failures, that those lessons are very hard to learn without actually failing. So, like, in some sense, part of the reward of this journey, of any risky journey, is to fail, and fail well, and to learn, and then fail in a different way, and then fail in a different way.
Yeah. But then, is there any data of how many people who failed actually rise up again?
No, I mean, there is selection bias, right? So
Yes.
that data basically can't exist,
Yeah.
right? But that's an important skill in life, is that you will fail, and then you have to pick yourself up and then try it again. And again, I think there is some privilege in being able to say this at where we sit at this point. uh, but I feel like I would have said the same thing without the privilege.
Yeah. But again, I mean, rising up again is an art, resilience and perseverance, and then the way you must, before you fall, there are tools that are available at that space before you fell, before one falls. The choices that one can make, or
Yeah,
one mustn't make, and those tools don't exist after you've fallen because that space is gone.
that's
So
right.
Paul,
Those decisions are done.
you need to look for, again, learn how to make choices. What was, you got your
That's
hands
right.
burned? What was it? Are there, is there any DNA sampling possible?
Yeah.
Well, this is the lesser, the it's related
Yeah.
to that which I did, and I mustn't do that. And this looks
Yeah.
solid, and this is that which I didn't do.
Yeah.
Reminiscent of that, maybe this is the thread that, that sort of,
Yeah.
that'll take
So,
me in the hope that I.
personally, actually, this is a magical thing about Silicon Valley. In particular, if you're going to start companies,
I mean, look at the terms silly and con. I mean, what about
my point was that if you commit to starting a company, and others in the ecosystem notice you, right? They kind of take note of, okay, this is the journey that you're on, and you've decided to start a company and so on. Like, once you commit to a path, there are people who come out of the woodwork and help you for no gain for themselves. Like Mayank example, right? He helped me so much at so many junctures in my life. I'm eternally grateful to him. And now I try to do the same thing, right? Whenever anybody approaches me about a company, a concept, or hey, I'm stuck here, I help them. I don't expect to get paid or anything of that sort, because that's not why I'm doing it. It is my responsibility. It is, there's a board that I have to lighten by helping others, because other people help me selflessly.
that? Is very, very well said. Your PhD in computational mathematics.
Uh-huh.
Tell us about that.
So,
I'm sorry to take the ride back to the Stanford to sort of remind you of the skeletons.
yeah, no, I mean, I think it was a great experience. It was a great experience. I got very, very lucky. So I have the dubious honor of sort of getting through the PhD program in like 20 months, something like that.
Don't tell me.
So, yeah, because again, I got very lucky. Everything that I tried worked out. And
Wow.
that doesn't happen in research, right? So, I got exceedingly lucky. Uh, there were amazing times. My wife and I, Riti, she was also at Stanford. She was doing her PhD in chemistry. We got married while we were still both grad students. It was a great time in our lives. We like I said, I was getting lucky with my research. Things were working out. We used to play computer games all the time. In addition to writing papers and doing research, used to hang out with friends. Yeah, it was awesome. And certainly compared to my education in India, it was intellectually very, very stimulating. The peer group was amazing, um, far smarter than I am, and I learned a lot from them. It was amazing, such an amazing experience.
But I have, some corrections to make in your, a couple of misconceptions to remove for your better, not the detriment, but for betterment. Uh,
Uh-huh.
the BV gets married, the gharwala gets marrowed.
Yeah.
Never say that we got married. It says my wife got married and I got marrowed.
Yeah.
So,
No, we've had a good time.
but anyway, jokes apart, I mean, jokes along. Um, Fine, 20 months, okay, your friends, peer circle, peers, etc., the kind of ambience that surrounded you, that sort of embraced you and protected you, provided to you. Fair enough. But tell us about computational mathematics, your PhD. Can you um, spend a few minutes to talk about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, like I said, I chose computational mathematics because as a discipline, it was a relatively new school at Stanford, and they essentially created this program which was a combination of applied mathematics and computer science, where the opportunity was to learn applied mathematics and then be able to write efficient computer programs to then uh, solve problems. And so I entered the program. The first thing I did is alongside the coursework, I started working for a professor in the computational fluid dynamics department. His name is Anthony Jameson. So I started writing computational fluid dynamics codes for understanding how fluid flows around aeroplanes and sailboats and so on. Then I spent some time in the mechanical department writing mechanical simulations, again very numerical in nature, simulating how objects would work under different kinds of mechanical stresses. Then I went to work in the AI lab with Andrew, as I mentioned. And then eventually I found this email from Gunnar regarding this unification and topology or topological data analysis, which is what I started doing with him. But I will say, it was a difficult journey, right? In the sense that I remember the first class that I had to take, literally the first class I took at Stanford was this class called partial differential equations. There was a professor who stood in the corner, literally stood in the corner for 5 minutes with his head down and just saying, like this. And he was like, oh, we'll be very lucky if we ever solve a partial differential equations. But in this course, we are going to try to solve two of them. And I don't think most of you will be able to solve any of them. And then literally he started writing on the board and I couldn't understand the symbols. Like I didn't know enough math to understand the symbols. So, so it was very tough.
Amazing.
But at the same time, I learned a lot. It was amazing, amazing fun.
Mhm. That's how do you um, what's immediate for you now? Where is um, thread robotics. What stage is it? It's of course recent. It's new.
Yeah.
Where are you headed? Is this it, or there are other there's a to-do list that you want to run through before you inning?
No, I think there's like a million ideas, right? But the nature and the commitment behind building a company is that to my investors, to our employees, my first and foremost commitment is thread robotics.
Hmm.
So, at Thread, we are still very young. We are at the very fun stage of sort of five people in a garage. We are still literally again five people in a garage, and this is like the best times in a startup because everybody knows what they're doing, and there is no translation loss. There is no when I say something and when somebody else says something, nothing is lost in between because as soon as you start adding people and the company starts growing, a lot of your time as a CEO, my time, will go into communication, right? Into making sure that everybody is on the same page, everybody knows where we are going, why are you doing what you're doing, why are they doing what they are doing, how do you work together. So like a lot of your time, my time, will go into that kind of coordination. And it's a different kind of challenge. It's also fun because alongside that, typically a company is succeeding while you're doing this, so it's fun in a different way. But it's a different intellectual challenge. So like I said, my entirety of my focus right now is on thread robotics, but as a person, there's like a million things I want to do, and we'll see which ones I get to do and in what order.
Do you have a sense of humor?
uh, I don't think there's a right answer to that question. It's a trick question. uh, maybe I do. I don't know.
Okay. Um, what about jokes? Do you like jokes? Um,
Yeah, yeah, I love jokes, absolutely.
do you like telling them or listening to them?
Listening to them. I'm a consumer, and if you have a good one, I'd love to listen to one.
No, I'm just the one who asks the questions. And how important is that? Um, as I said, jokes along. That for me, that sense of humor is among the keystones of any successful endeavor.
Yeah,
Sometimes I feel, we've spoken about failures and successes, and something that you very rightly pointed out, that success is a very bad teacher. Um, when you fall and you fail, it's that sense of humor, ridicule,
yeah,
to be able to, uh, if you fall, you say, "Oh, teri gir gaya," that's kind of a thing.
yeah,
But the others, "Oh, acha gir gaya si yaar."
yeah.
Totu bach gaya. The ways of looking at it, right?
That's right.
For me, that sense of humor and being able to crack, a joke or laugh, even at oneself, among that sense, within the
Yeah,
realm of the sense of humor, I hold people very highly. Those who can laugh on themselves, who have no fear of that. How do you see these values? I mean, is am I right, or you have another opinion about this?
no, I think you're absolutely right. I think humor lifts you up, and it's very important. And I feel like this is kind of where, culturally at least, it's a great thing about the Sikh and the Punjabi culture, which is that we live our lives in a way where come what may, and we are able to laugh and joke about it. We don't take things too seriously, and so I think that ethos is very valuable.
I mean, we are
So it's
serious in not taking things seriously.
yeah, that's right. I think like not taking things serious is mischaracterizing it. It's not like you don't take things seriously, but exactly as you said, right? Bad stuff or unexpected stuff will happen. That's just the way life is. And if you can be, if you can laugh it off, then it makes it a whole lot easier. Like it doesn't sting as much. And typically, if you can make other people, who are in the same category with you, kind of laugh alongside you and brush it aside, that's like a superpower.
Any question that you would want to ask me?
Lots of questions. I mean, I think I find what you do super fascinating, right? To be a conservator, it's I would love to, I'd love to know sort of which things do you treasure the most, right? I've spoken a lot about things that I treasure and what I do, but as a conservator, especially somebody who's expertly sampling uh, these experiences from people from all walks of life, and from all eras, it seems like, what do you treasure the most?
Well, I was hoping that you will say, I don't have a question for you now that you asked. Um, the series itself, I mean, I can immediately relate your question in a few dimensions. One is the YaarAnād virtual Baiṭhak series centric. The other is my avatar as a conservator, as a revivalist. I mean, who's brought in an era now. People don't even know who are playing and reading and singing and walking the way they walk. That walk and that talk did not exist anymore in the later 80s when I intervened. Um, uh, so I could also relate your question to that. I could also relate your query with regards to the entire Gursikh idea, Guru Nanak's vision, in terms of what do I treasure the most. And but before I, so let me, maybe I'm making a choice now to answer in two folds. One is to do with the YaarAnād virtual Baiṭhak series, sent
Mhm.
from that perspective. You alluded to my conversation, not literally conversations, but my engagement with people from all walks of life across generations.
Yeah,
So I'm assuming that that was perhaps the main focus.
actually, not just about people, although I would love to hear the answer, but again, from my perspective, it is your job, right? Like it's your mission to sample so many experiences, so many lives. What has been the most fascinating?
Yeah.
I'm so curious.
Yeah. So, exactly. The process of becoming a Vidwan, a person who lacks Vidya,
Mhm.
wisdom, the intangible assets, those which can be deemed as intangible assets,
Mhm.
values, are not easily gained. Uh,
Right.
One cannot even acquire them. You cannot buy them. Can you buy forgiveness? Can you buy humility? You can pretend to be humble. Politeness is a very easy
Uh-huh.
recourse to take. One can be polite, and people think that it's an easily mistaken ornament for humility.
Mhm.
Conceited people, cheats, can be very polite, and they can run away with literally everything that one has, just because they had a facade, they had a mask. um,
Mhm.
so the process of becoming knowledgeable is what has been my intent of waking people up, reminding them of the most important opportunity that we have in our lifetimes, especially given the COVID. I was in lockdown in Rome when
Yeah.
when it all struck and when Italy came to a standstill. And I began this series in April, and I was doing some Punjabi monologues. The first one went over 10 million views on COVID. My shout at Punjabi, both West and East Punjab, because they were not taking care. And I started summing up. The very first one went viral. But then in April, I began because I saw that people were becoming phobic, they were frightened, they were forgetting what life is, etc. So I thought, I cannot change my vocation. I've dealt with knowledgeable ones. So, and I have done a lot of documentation, which is as a conservator, as an archivist, people don't even know the kind of interventions I've been instrumental. They think oh, we know Bhai Baldeep Singh, but we don't. They are living what he's done, but they don't know. Um,
Yeah.
but this became public. For the first time, I was conversing with people, and there was no nightmare of the prospect of post production and
Yeah.
editing this and that. This was live, like our conversation now. What if we've logged 3 hours, 15 minutes, and 27 seconds, and we don't. I don't have to worry about post production or editing. जितना दी आवाज
Yeah.
आई है, signal कितने
Yeah.
टुटिया कुछ होया. That is what it is. So
Yeah.
I wanted to remind people or let them revisit the idea of what is a knowledgeable one like, and to engaging in to engage in a conversation which um, uh, tells us about the journey that a knowledgeable one took to become knowledgeable, and then to see what knowledge is to them, and then what it could mean to us, that knowledge. Uh,
Mhm.
so that has been the purpose in a way of mine, and it's been an honor really from when I began with Maestro Luigi Polsini, who's one of the top, string players, specializes in early Renaissance, Baroque era, etc. Instruments like Viola da Gamba after Jordi Savall. He's the other name that people take. So starting with him and you today is the 206th Baiṭhak. And my conversations have topped up to 12 hours in a single sitting at
Wow.
times, or 4 5 4 5 hours in 2 3 4 sittings, and continuing like that. So it has been trying to revisit life, not to be bogged down with only the negativity. Kinne mar gaye, how many have died?
Yeah.
That's one. That is important. We have to be mindful. We have to mitigate. But I think one of the successes is that at least a few people I've had glued to their chairs for for a long time during the COVID. So that way I've helped mitigate, you know, the COVID spread. But
Yeah.
overall, I think to do with the most precious thing in my, I think, is the problem as a socio-political activist. I see the problem of hypocrisy. I have watched, for example, this entire Donald Trump
Oh
saga,
God.
but I have studied it. It's been like a case study of how a fool like that can actually become the so-called leader of the free world. And
Yeah.
what leader of the free world? I mean, what free world, which is not free from greed, from hatred, from that subaltern idea? Look at where Liz Cheney is accepted to be on the
Yeah.
board, whatever committee is being formed,
Yeah.
Senate committee, and then McCarthy is saying that how she's closer to Democrats than she is to us, kind of a thing. I mean, this is the
Yeah.
level of discourse. And if this kind of a bum is to become a president of the United States, where is humanity headed? Right.
Yeah.
So, and look at other countries. Look at Brazil, the way the Amazon
Oh
forest are
God.
being dismantled, the number of the kind of the number of species that are being lost every day, every year. We are headed. I think Guru Nanak's vision of binding in one um, um, uh, you know 24 languages, 120 dialects. One, to prove that revelation is not monolingual. You can speak any language, the language that you speak, but once you become worthy, when it is time, revelation will come in the language you speak. So you don't have to
Yeah.
change anything. You don't have to change your names. Kabir will remain Kabir, Bhagat Kabir. He will not need to be made a Kabir Singh. Baba Sheikh Farid can offer namaz 5 times a day in Gurbani and will not need to be changed into a Baba Farid Singh, you know. So this idea of bringing people together and is what humanity needs. A Ved Kateb Kaho Humat Chuthe Chutha Jo Na Bichare. We are lacking in that. I think the platform that Guru Nanak brought is that even without changing each other, even without telling that I don't need to tell you the good news that I think I have, right? I have the revelation and you must learn only if you want to go to heaven, you must learn. That's nonsense. It's been moved on, moved aside now. That era is gone. The future is that I can be what I want, you be what you want, but there's a platform where we can all be together without
Right.
competing, whether this idea is good or bad. It doesn't really mean anything because where we come from, that is the mine of ideas, and our ideas are not needed. We need, Karta Purkh Parmeshwara, but Karta doesn't need me. I wasn't and I won't be. I am and I, the paradox which you were alluding to earlier, the way I was translating it was when on one hand, Guru Tegh Bahadur says, "E jag tu eka pahar ta sacha manya keh bijar." This world is a mountain of smoke. Is basically just smoke. It's just
Yeah.
literally would be mountain of smoke, or Tuma is also illusion. But then Guru Nanak says, "Eh jag sache ki hai kothadi, sache ka vichwas." This is the mansion of the true one, the real one, and the real one is present within the doing. But then, if I were to look a supna, whether I am the dream of the doer or I am the doing of the doer, that and I don't need an answer. I'm
Right.
not worried about that questions. I'm just एक बार मैं लिखा सका कि um, ठानी है बस होण दी. I mean, the question, the poetry begins with मैं कौन हाँ, क्यों हाँ, क्यों हाँ, किस अंजाम ਲਈ हाँ, ਤੇ ਹੁਣ ਬਸ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਣਨ ਦੀ ਹੁਣ ਬਸ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਣਨ ਦੀ ਸਿਆਣਨ ਦੀ ਰੁਚੀ ਮੁੱਕ ਬਣੀ. I've lost all interest in knowing who am I, where am I from, why am I here, where am I headed. Bus, that's it.
Interesting.
Bus taviya. I have no interest. And in fact, I'm now reminded that it began with the ਕਦੋਂ ਕੋਈ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਕੋਈ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਮੁੱਕਦੀ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ. ਹੁਣ ਬਸ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਣਨ ਦੀ ਸਿਆਣਨ ਦੀ ਰੁਚੀ ਮੁੱਕਦੀ ਬਣੀ. So I have lost all interest in learning about people. But then the paradox, my intent here by way of our conversation is not to know you, is the process of becoming a vidwan. You see, it's again that somehow a solution. It's not an interview. I'm not sort of jumping around. I've interviewed so many people. I have no interest. Thank you very much. I don't have time. I'm one of the most
Right.
expensive bums, to hire on the planet. And this is more than a charity that I deserve to offer, the kind of hours and hours and hours, tens of hours. But the idea of knowing the without and knowing even the within. And the third part of that poem was कि तू है is a conversation directly with the Karta Purkh Parmeshwara. कि तू है, किवें दा है, तेरा सरनामा की है, your address सरनामा is an old term.
Yeah.
Address. वो कहता चल जा रब्बा तुरदा बन. Even to Rab, the poet says कि तू तुरदा बन. तेनू भी जानन दी सियानन दी रुचि मुक्दी बनी. So even I have no interest in knowing about you. तेरियां तो बस तू ही हो जाने. Only you are the knower of you. मैं and then in the end I sum up by saying कि मैं अनजान ही खूब सही कि ठानी है बस होन दी. I have now resolved just to be. That's it. I just want to be, and the way only I can be. So that for me
Fascinating.
is where I am at. I have been at personally. But then, as long as Guru Nanak says, "Jab lag दुनिया रही है नानक किच कही है किच सुनी है." As long as we are in the world, Nanak says we must say some and we must listen some. I think within all of these kind of paradoxes, catch two twos, and seeming mismatches is where I have tried to. I think Guru Nanak's conversation, the platform that he has built, which is a platform of acceptance, which doesn't require people's views to be converted from A to Z. A total turnaround is not needed, but you're not sort of beholden to what you have, and you become a Brahm Vichari, you Vidya Vichari, Ta Paropkari, as Bani says. That
Yeah.
your usher, you're in the era of contemplation and discussion of deliberation is we are ushered into that space. That I think is what that possibility, that ideation that something like this could exist, rather than saying no, Islam is there, let it be now. We don't need it. We don't need
Yeah.
Christianity. We don't need Judaism. We don't need Jainism. We don't need Vaishnav, Sakat, Shaib. No, he says. I mean, Naku Hindu. Others, we are nobody's that. We are Allah Ram ke Jind Puran. As Guru Arjan also says that we can be what we are. Doesn't really mean anything. Puja or namaz hui, they're all the same in the end. And
Yeah.
when I look at it from a logical perspective, how is puja and namaz the same? And I found the solution once upon a time when I was living in the Stone Age, is because both of them are human constructs. So that's why
Right.
they're the same. They are different acts, but they're created by people. So it's us who
Yeah.
created them. They're not like sun that was not created by.
That's right.
So I think these kind of possibilities, which are non-dogmatic, which are removing all the prison cell reality from around us, allows us to flutter our wings and to fly freely and deal with ideas wherever they are. Like one of the faculties I wanted to build in the conservatory of dedicated to the study of arts, aesthetics, and cultural traditions is dedicated to scriptures. All things which are sacred written anywhere in the world would be studied in their original languages, right?
Yeah.
So these are anyway to respond briefly.
Excellent.
I hope
Fascinating.
bored you enough. Any other question that you
No, I feel like I need to go sleep now. it's
Okay. I wanted
it's
that was my last question. Now that you've already said, okay, once we end it, would you get scolded
yeah.
or what? What will be the husher that will be meted out to you? Was my naughty question, but anyway, you don't have to answer if you don't want to.
No, I think I will be attacked in the morning by my daughter,
Okay,
and so
you're not
I'm
up
just hoping that it's after
Saturday.
8 a.m. in the morning. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yes, no, of
Uh,
course, yeah. But thank
but
you
we'll see.
so much, Gurjeet. It's been very meaningful
No, it
for
was
all of
excellent.
us.
Thank you so much. It was an honor.
No, no. It was a pleasure is all mine. And I'm looking forward to our continued conversation, even as part of the second part of our conversation in a few days, whenever our itineraries meet.
Yeah,
Love to see your presentations. You
sure. Absolutely.
Thank you so very much, and
All
I'm
right.
grateful for
Okay.
it. And I know it's
Bye
late.
bye.
What
Good
time is
night.
it now? It's like 2 a.m. for you. It's 2:30
Yeah,
p.m.
it's 2 a.m.
Super. And have a wonderful weekend and have a
All right.
celebrate your
You
week.
as well.
Love to
Thank
everyone.
you.
Yeah. So, friends, that was my conversation with Dr. Gurjeet Singh. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you all for joining. I know there's so many messages I've received via DM as well as by way of comments, and I look forward to our continuing conversation. Kindly share the conversation with Gurjeet to as many, in your respective worlds, and follow me on Patreon and on Facebook and YouTube, etc. And I will see you very shortly. Khuda Hafiz, Namaskar, a very good night to those in California, and a very good evening to all of you here in India. Sat Kartar.